ストって。
よく聞きなさい。
Once again, there was a call from Kraus to the guest house, and the message was that Kinzo wanted to hold a test to see if the grandchildren had the qualifications to become his successor.
当主様は次期当主をお父さんたちの兄弟からではなく孫たちの中から選びたいとそうおっしゃっている。
From Kraus's restrained style of speech, Jessica realized that his daughter that he was being forced to speak. And she was forced to realize that the hostages were being exposed to danger even now. And if they refused this test, there was a possibility that the hostages would be harmed.
それで私たちはどうすればいいの？
待て。
Kraus put down the receiver, then looked at the grinning Kinzo on the other side of the bars. Kinzo gave his next order.
テストの前に無関係なものを排除しなくてはならない。郷田と熊沢がそこにいるのであろう。テストに干渉されては邪魔なのでな。彼らをゲストハウスより追放せよ。
追放ですか？
バラ庭園に園芸倉庫があったはず。そこへ郷田と熊沢を閉じ込めて施錠せよ。まずはそれからだ。直ちに遂行するように伝えよ。我が武具たちが監視する。疑わしい行為に及べばテストは直ちに中止し、お前たちすべてを生贄として処刑する。
わかりました。もしもしジェシカ、今から父さんの言うことをよく聞きなさい。
Kraus relayed the orders to lock up Goda and Kumasawa.
どんなテストをなさるつもりですか？
実に簡単なテストだとも。孫たちの覚悟を見せてもらうだけだ。さて、どんな結果を見せてくれるのか。
Looking disgusted, Kyrie watched Kraus, who was talking with the children. I hate it, but for now we cannot refuse orders. In this dungeon, a feeble resistance won't amount to anything. If we provoke him too much and drive him to a position where he might kill us, there will be no longer any way for us to stop this murder. For now, the only choice is to obey his rules without agitating him, all the while waiting for an opportunity. However, if we continue to obediently follow his commands, the children might be attacked in this so-called test, and they might even lose their lives. Whether we feign obedience and try to resist, nothing will cause the situation to improve. Anyway, straining our eyes so that we don't let a single chance escape until the very end is our only resistance possible now. While telling herself this, Kyrie watched over Cross as he delivered Kinzo's orders.
キリエさん、ここは辛抱しましょう。
分かってるわ。悔しいけれど、今は待つしかない。この鉄格子さえ何とかできれば、私たちは屋敷へ戻ることができるんだから。
なんとかここを出られれば、試してみましょう。金蔵さん、頼みがある。
何か我が友よ。
金蔵さんが子供たちを試したいというのはよくわかった。金蔵さんの納得のいくようにするといい。金蔵さんの力がなければとっくに潰れていたかもしれない後ろ宮家だ。その担い手を慎重に選びたい気持ちよくわかる。それにそのための親族会議だ。私ら邪魔はせんよ。
お前の理解が得られて助かる。そうだ、これは親族会議なのだ。私が次期当主を選び決定する最後の親族会議なのだよ。
それでだが金蔵さん、ここはあまりに冷えすぎる。あんたのテストの邪魔はせんから もう少し暖かい場所に移してもらうことはできんかね。
In Nanjo's words, the slight signs that Kinzo's mood had been improving were blown away. Nanjo was struck with a moment of silence as Kinzo gazed at him with dangerous eyes, as though appraising him.
確かにここは冷えますね。老体にはおつらいでしょう。親方様、上の部屋に移し替えてもよいのでは。
それはできぬ。甘いぞ南條。お前は一手猶予を与えるような素振りで実に華麗に布石を打つではないか。その手には乗らんぞ。凍えるというなら真っ赤に焼けた石炭でも敷き詰めてやればよい。
申し訳ございません。
Regalia had tried to help out, but in the end, Kinzo would not comply.
あなたたちはおとなしいのね。その気になればこんな鉄格子簡単に破れるでしょう。
ここを破ったとて何もなりません。
確かにここを破ったならゴールドスミスのゲームが終わることを意味する。あなたたちも、そしてゲストハウスの人間たちも即座に金蔵の儀式の生贄となるでしょうね。でも案外あなたたちだけかもしれないわよ。この状況を打開できる力を持っているのはね。黄金鏡にたどり着きたいんでしょ。叶えたい夢がいっぱいあるんでしょ。
ガープ、挑発はいけませんよ。これはあなたのゲームではない。親方様の、そしてお嬢様のゲームです。
どうしたロノウェイ。
いえいえ何も。捕虜とおしゃべりをしていました。お許しを。
Gap sent one final sneering smile at Kanan and turned away. Kanan could only bite his lower lip and shake his fist.
くそ。
よく頑張ったね。よく我慢したよ。
僕たちは無力だ。家具だから。
そうだね。私たちは無力。でも家具は必要とされることだって、そして愛されることだってあるよ。今の私たちは暗い地下室にしまわれているだけ。きっといつか誰かが愛してくれる、必要としてくれるから。だから今は挑発に乗らないで耐えようね。
お父さん、ゴーダたちを倉庫に閉じ込めるよう指示をしました。
よかろう。電話を切ってよい。シエスタ姉妹、孫たちがゴーダと熊沢を閉じ込めるのを監視せよ。もしも不審な動きがあるようならば、その時点で次期当主を選ぶテストは終了だ。
When Kinzo made his order, the Chester sisters appeared behind him in line.
了解であります。石膏は私がやる。556と410は両翼支援。45は全集計会議。
00-556は。
そうだった。すまない。
いい子でした。だから私は嫌いに。いいやつは。
何をしているかシエスタ姉妹、我が命令を遂行せよ。
失礼しました。では監視に向かうであります。出撃。
Chester sisters erased their forms simultaneously. Nanjo and Kiria had witnessed the instance they appeared and disappeared as if by teleportation, but they interpreted this as moving in and out of the darkness in a way that only looked like teleportation, and the two could do nothing but rub their eyes.
さて、私はテストの準備をしよう。ロノウェイ、ガープ、 お前たちには試験官を頼む。ワルギリアはこやつらを監視するように。何しろ我が家具が2人いる。一応は警戒せよ。
He glanced at Shannon and Cannon. Tightly closing her eyes, Shannon gave a slight bow and answered wordlessly, avoiding any unnecessary actions.
かしこまりました。注意します。
リーヤの老体には寒くて辛くない？湯たんぽでも持ってくる？
うるさいです。早くお行きなさい。ガップ。
さてさて、テストとは、そして試験官とは、今回のゲームは変わった試みですね。お嬢様を楽しませる展開になると良いのですが。
さあさあおいでなさい、ヤギの従者たち。
Regalia began to call out into the darkness, and from that spot, 3 massive goat-headed attendants suddenly appeared.
リーチェの眷属ね。便利だわ。しかも暖かそうだし。ああ、湯たんぽの代わりね。なら、ヤギより羊の方がいいんじゃない？
カシミヤ臓器のくせにうるさいですよ。彼らは賢くはありませんが、命令に忠実で強靭な頼れる従者たちです。
うん、任せるぞ。我が友ワルギリアよ。残りの者は私と来い。
With a dignified gesture, Kinzo fluttered his cloak. Following him were Ronave and Gop, as well as 3 recently summoned goat attendants.
あなたたちは私と残るのですよ。ついていかないように。
The goats jumped in surprise and then came tottering back. Kyrie, who had been watching the stunned as if this all played out, couldn't help but snort.
愉快な部下ね。ゴールドスミス卿より死後の許可は与えられていませんよ。
She was probably embarrassed. Regalia had spoken coolly, but Kyrie saw through that, and for a little while she couldn't restrain her muffled laughter. However, on the inside, Kyrie was surprised at the number of people Kinzo had with him. After all, including Kinzo himself, at least 10 enemies had already been spotted. The dungeon they were in currently locked in is supposedly underneath the hidden mansion called Kuadorian. Although the mansion had been whispered of, not even Cross had known of its existence until today. Are there actually several facilities like this on Rokkenjima, where many unknown henchmen that only Kinzo knows of hides? Just how many humans are on Rokkenjima, locked away by the typhoon? No, on the contrary. Were the only ones under the impression that there were only 18 people on the island? Were we, who bickered over whether Beatrice existed or not, worried whether there's a 19th person existed or not, nothing more than frogs in a well on this island? No wait, not only that. Right now, are there actually more people on the enemy side than on ours?
何が起こってるの？一体。魔女？悪魔？魔法？それを信じろというの？おかしいのは私の目？それとも頭なの？頭がどうにかなりそうよ。
A mass murder by magic. Demons forming and disappearing into thin air. Setting aside the enemy's numbers, how shall we interpret the various things thrust before our eyes that cannot be explained with the common sense of our world? Kyrie started to feel as though she didn't know what was going on anymore. And while desperately battling the urge to abandon everything and give up, she gritted her teeth and tried to hold on to sanity. Obviously, Goda and Kumasawa were quite unwilling to be locked up in the Rose Garden shed, but they were threatened that if they resisted, the hostages' safety could not be guaranteed. It was fairly hard to get them to agree, but once they started thinking that their safety might actually be guaranteed if the key to the gardening storehouse was to be handed to them after being shut inside, and when it was decided that blankets and food would be carried in for them, they were finally convinced.
ここは寒々しいですね。私たちはいつまでここに閉じ込められていればいいのでしょうか。
下手をすると月曜の朝まで 丸々一昼夜はいてもらうことになるかもしれない。本当にお二人には申し訳なく思うよ。
George and Balor cleared a space on the floor and then spread the blankets there. They also left canned food, crackers, and other light snacks they had brought.
月曜の朝までを二人でこの量じゃ辛いな。せめて厨房に寄れたなら。
余計な場所には行くなと言われてる。私たちは監視されてるらしいしな。
何もお力になれないことを申し訳なく思います。こんな時に皆さんのおそばにいてこその私どもなのに。
仕方ないです。それより熊沢さんをよろしく頼みますね。何が起こるかわからない。いざという時は臨機応変に助けてほしい。そして何よりも無事でいてほしい。
ええ、分かっています。皆さんこそ気をつけてくださいね。今の親方様はまるで人の命をチェスの駒のように奪います。気をつけてください。
Go to stare at the floor, even now unable to believe that what had happened as he remembered that atrocity in the dining hall. And he hung his head in shame at his failure to fully describe that terror.
ありがとう。くれぐれも注意してくださいね。熊沢さんも。
ジョージさんたちもくれぐれもご用心なさってくださいね。もう私には何が何やらさっぱりわかりませんとも。
それじゃあ僕たちは行きます。行こう、バトラ君、ジェシカちゃん、ほらマリアちゃんも。
Looking at the pitiful expressions on the imprisoned pair's faces, it really got hard to close the shutters. But we can't disobey. We're being watched. The shutter was brought down and locked. Then George walked towards a small window on the side of the storehouse. On that side, there was a small latticed window that could only admit light and ventilation. It looked like something from a jail, making the two of them seem even more pitiable. But on the other hand, it would hopefully protect them from Kinzo and his subordinates. He opened the window and called out.
大丈夫ですか？寒くないですか？
ええ。毛布をこんなにいただきましたからね。くるまっていればきっと平気ですよ。
石油ストーブとかを持ってくればよかったな。
ここじゃ換気できないからね。辛いだろうけど今は仕方がない。僕たちは人質を取られている。逆らえない。
畜生。なんとかキレイさんたちを救出することができれば。
聞かれてるかもしれないよ。ゴーダさん、これそのシャッターの鍵です。
確かにお預かりします。
Goda took the key, showed it to Kumasawa, and placed it in his own pocket. There's only one key to the guarding shed's shutter. That key is being held by the ones locked up inside it. If the children had kept it, and it had been stolen from them by some chance, that would be nothing but expose the lives of those in the shed to danger. And even with the key, the shutter could not be opened from the inside. Kinzo's demands were fulfilled this way. However, there was now no longer any way to open the shed from the outside either. This protected them. Kinzo had ordered that they be confined, and we could do nothing but trust that this closed room would protect them. Jessica watched this while holding Maria's hand, and looked over at the thickets in the pitch-black rose garden. Somewhere in this darkness, somebody was hiding, watching to see whether we obeyed orders or not. Of course, when we pointed our flashlights out there, no suspicious silhouettes appeared. But somebody was surely out there, hiding and watching. I was hit many times with an urge to scream at them, but I was able to hold that urge back through reason. The four children left the area, repeatedly looking back over their shoulders. The light from the faint light bulb in the gardening storehouse was seeping out slightly. I wonder if this insane incident will come to an end somehow, so that we can meet with those two again. To George, who had closed the shutter himself, the resistance of the lock had made it feel as though he had killed them with his own hands.
それでも俺たちは逆らえないんだよな。
テストだと。クソじじいめ、ふざけやがって。それで母さんたちが殺されて父さんたちが捕まって、理解できねえぜ。ぶっ殺してやる。
大丈夫だよジェシカお姉ちゃん、悲しくなんかないよ。
マリ
もうすぐ魔女は蘇る。すぐに黄金鏡で会えるよ。あいて
不謹慎なことで笑うんじゃねえぜ。何が魔女復活の儀式だ。妄想はじいさまの頭の中だけにしときゃいいものを大勢巻き込みやがって。こいつは高くつくぜ。
畜生め。ゲストハウスに戻ろう。おじいさまから電話があった際に不在だったらまずい。
Urged on by George, everyone began walking toward the guest house. At that moment, Jessica turned in a circle, facing towards the darkness of the Rose Garden, and roared.
おい、誰か見てんだろ。ジジイに伝えとけ。絶対にぶち殺してやるってな。行こう。
Of course, there was no reply, only the howl of the wind and rain. The children returned to the guest house, while fearing what was waiting for them up ahead. After they left, from the exact point of darkness that Jessica had yelled at, 2 rabbit ears sprung up.
ごめんなさい。バレてました。45がすっとろいからバレたに。竜王様に怒られる。ごめんなさい。竜王様に言いつけるのは許してください。
黙れ静かに。どうせハッタリだ。合田と熊沢の監禁は確認した。任務完了。報告に戻るぞ。
イエーイイエーイ。泣いた。
連帯責任で人参と水だけの刑になりたいか。行くぞ。
The fact that they were being watched certainly seemed to be true, because when they returned to the cousin's room, turned the lights on and lay down on their beds, the phone rang again. Earlier, Jessica had been answering the phone, seeing as this was her house, but now as the eldest, George who picked it up. This time, Kiri-san was on the other end of the line. George handed it to Ballard out of consideration.
もしもし、キリエさんか。そっちは大丈夫なのか。
心配をありがとう。今のところは快適よ。ごめんなさい。死後は慎めと命令されてる。今から伝えることをよく聞いて。
The fact that they were hostages still hadn't changed. Kinzo or one of his subordinates was listening to the conversation. Ballard restrained the urge to talk about other things and focus on what Kyrie had to say.
テストはジェシカちゃん、ジョージ君、バトラ君、そしてマリアちゃんの順で行われるそうよ。順番に呼び出すから、それまでその部屋を出ないこと。呼び出された者は一人で指定された場所に向かうこと。
Ballard repeated it out loud so that the cousins listening in around him could hear.
ジェシカ、兄貴、俺、マリアの順で呼び出しがあるまで部屋にいろ。だな、分かった。マリアもなのかや。9歳の子にまで。クソジジイは何を強いる気なんだ。
後ろ宮家の命運はあなたたちに握られてるわ。頑張って。
ああ。
Ballard knows the strange nuance in Kyrie's words. Even without any blood connection, he could still understand thanks to the long-lasting bond they shared. At this point, it doesn't make sense to worry about the Ushiromiya family itself. That probably wasn't the message Kyrie wanted to send. She probably meant there's no way for us to escape from this dungeon, and we can only wait to be rescued. Our lives are in your hands. Something like that.
ああ、任せてくれ。どんなテストか知らねえが上等だぜ。受けて立ってやら。本気のテストなんだよな。マジにやっちまって。いいんだよな。
ええ、本気のテストよ。おじい様も本気で試すつもりでいるわ。
ダメだな。全然ダメだぜ。死にかけの老いぼれが俺と本気？寝言は棺に入ってから言いやがれ。そこにいるジジイに言っとけ。次期当主は俺だ。その最初の仕事はてめえの面に鉄拳ぶち込んでやることだってな。
Even Valkyria having to repeat it, Balor's powerful declaration of war reached Kinzo's ears.
バトラー、それは実に楽しみであるぞ。一度は後ろ宮の名を捨てた男が何を身につけ、何の境地に至って我が前に現れるというのか、楽しそう伝えよ。
Unfortunately, Kinzo's voice was not picked up by the receiver. Therefore, Kyrie spoke for him.
大いに上等だそうよ。いい？バトラ君。手加減は不要よ。あなたはルドルフさんの息子。いいえ、私の息子よ。誰に自慢しても恥ずかしくないところを私にも見せてちょうだい。あなたに全てを託すわ。
了解だぜ、母ちゃん。あとは任せておけ。
私たち全員は当主跡継ぎの資格を失っている。もう私たちは取られてゲーム版から外された駒も同然よ。だからあなたたちだけで戦って。
キリエさん。
The nuance of those words meant, we've already given up, so forget about us. But for that very reason, I won't give up. I'll definitely crush this test or whatever, and save everyone.
それでは、一番最初のジェシカちゃんへのテストの指示よ。自分の部屋へ行け、ですって。
自分の部屋？
お屋敷のジェシカちゃんの自室って意味のよね。
ジェシカに代わる。直接伝えてやってくれ。ジェシカ。
もしもし。はい。わかりました。私からか。もう覚悟決めたぜ。行ってくるぜ。
Even Jessica was probably tempted to succumb to the fear of a girl her age, but she crushed those feelings and strengthened her resolve.
用心してね。
私たちは監視されてんだろ。余計なこともできない。言いなりになるしかないさ。
食堂でジジイは何のためらいもなく瞬く間に6人を殺したという。それは俺たちに対しても同じかもな。
分かってる。返り討ちにしてやるぜ。
無茶はダメだよ。危険だと思ったら自分を最優先にして。クラウスおじさんが自分のために娘が犠牲になったことを知ったら胸が張り裂けてしまうに違いないから。
逆も同じだぜ。父さんと母さんが殺されて私だけが生き残ったら私の胸だって張り裂けるぜ。
バトラ君、さっきの話は本当だよね。
ああ、キリエさんたちはもう覚悟を決めている。
ならなおのこと上等だぜ。みんなの命は私たちの双剣にかかってるってことだ。人質みんなは囚われの身で何もできない。なら私たちが何とかするしかねえんだぜ。
もし何かあったらゲストハウスに逃げ戻って その時点で僕たちがおじい様のゲームに付き合うのは終了だ。
兄貴。
その時点で僕たちは宣戦布告、どこかに閉じ込められている彼らを救い出し、おじい様にはしかるべき処遇を与える。
いいのか兄貴。シャノンちゃんもいるんだろ。
だからといって僕は座して婚約者が殺されるのを待ちはしないよ。僕が恐ろしいのはおじい様にシャノンが殺されるかもしれないことに怯えることじゃない。
なるほどな。確かにこいつは次期当主が誰かを決めるってテストらしいぜ。
だな。クソジジイの顔面に一番最初に拳をお見舞いしたやつが次の当主だぜ。
George, Balor, and Jessica each forcefully nodded their heads and put their fists together. Then Jessica headed off to her own room, as designated. Her form disappeared into the darkness of the rose garden, waving in the strong winds. Watching her go, George and Balor gripped their fists even tighter, making them quiver. Left on the second floor, Maria watched Jessica's back through the window. She wore a blank expression.
みんなは何を息巻いてるのかな。ベアトリーチェが蘇ればみんな生き返らせてもらえるのにね。
Jessica's form was already being completely swallowed up by the darkness. At that time, the phone began to ring again. Balor and George heard it and came clamoring back, but Maria picked up the receiver right away.
もしもし。
マリア様ですか？シャノンです。ジョージ様に代わっていただけますか？
This time, it was Shannon on the phone. And this time, the message was to tell the next person, George, where he was to go. Of course, since the time of her birth, Jessica had been raised in this mansion. The atrophied, Western-style house that the cousins called a mansion was her home. And yet, she had never understood her cousin's feelings as much as she did today. At the same time, she had never felt her own home, which she had known well, to be as alien as it seemed now. Her own room. This had once been her hideaway, the only place in the vast mansion where she could feel at peace. However, she had never felt as much pressure coming from that door as she did now.
テストだって。一体何が待ち受けてやがるんだ。まさか私の机とか引っかき回してねえだろうな。
She acted tough, trying to deceive herself, trying to make herself believe that she wasn't scared of anything. Readying herself, she opened the door to her room. When she saw that, fortunately the room didn't appear to be messed up, she relaxed. No one was there. Of course. There was nowhere for anyone to hide here. Right away, Jessica locked the door behind her. This way, the room was safe. She peeked under the bed and in the closet, but of course no one was hiding.
なんだってんだ。
She looked at the clock. It was just past 23:10. Her tension lessened and fatigue came back to her entire body. She realized how messed up this whole day had been. It was still about 2300. The plan had been for all the cousins to gather, have fun playing around, talk animately about various things together into the night. Normally, we would be doing that kind of thing right now. Why has it turned into this?
全部あのクソジジイのせいだ。よくも母さんをみんなを
She shook her head back and forth with anger and sadness, but there was no one here to direct those emotions at. Because of the lock, the room's security was guaranteed. Remembering that one more time, Jessica somehow regained her calm. If it keeps up like this and nothing happens, I want to go to the dining hall and see Mom's dead face. Even though Goda emphasized so strongly that it was gruesome and I definitely shouldn't go look at it. Even so, I wanted to see her face at the end. But we were warned repeatedly that stepping out of line even a little would put the hostages in danger. Could it be that locking the door was also against the rules? If I close myself up in here, I alone might be saved. But if I don't open it, it'll surely be against the rules, and Dad, Kanan-kun, Shannon, Aunt Kyrie, and Dr. Nanjo will be killed. There's no way the scales will balance out between 5 lives and my own 1 life. Jessica tightly shut her eyes, resisting the other part of herself that said, "Isn't it okay as long as I stay alive?" Faced the door and made to unlock it. At that time, a crisp applause rang out, making Jessica's heart leap.
鍵をかけたままならルール違反ということになり、人質たちにも危害が及ぶかもしれません。しかしそれでも自分の命だけは助かるかもしれん。しかしあなたはその誘惑に耐え、自ら鍵を開けようとした。そのあなたの勇気は称賛に値しますよ。
誰？
If I, the owner of this room, searched everywhere where a human could have been hiding, where did this man come from? There's nowhere for a human to hide. But could something non-human have managed it? This was supposedly my first meeting with this largely built middle-aged man. I didn't recognize this guy, who looked like a butler and bore the crest of the one-winged eagle.
はじめまして、ジェシカ様。私は親方様より家具頭を任されております。72柱の27位、ロの上と申します。
ロの上、源氏さん。
ああ、源氏は私の弟のような存在。あるいはこの世界における私の正しい姿だったのかもしれません。より白だったと言っても良いでしょうな。
何を言ってんだこいつ。
おっと、これは失礼しました。人間には話しても理解できぬ話。それでは本題に移りましょう。
クソジジイの言うテストとかいうやつだな。
さようでございます。こちらが親方様がジェシカ様に賜まれましたテストでございます。
At Ronove's elegant gesture, like that of a butler ordering a meal to be sent out, many gold butterflies flew up out of nowhere.
なんだよこれ。
As a cloud of gold butterflies spun around in a small swirl, they gathered in one place. Then that golden mound disappeared in a pile of leaves blown away by a cold, wintry wind. And there lay a western envelope with a one-winged eagle crest on gold leaf. With a gesture, Ronove urged her to pick it up. Jessica timidly did so, and opened the letter inside.
なんだこれ。
非常にシンプルな次期当主の資格を探るテストでございます。そこに記されている問いに、どうか後ろ宮家を担う次期当主としての心構えで臨んでいただき、答えとそれに至ったお考えをお聞かせください。
バカ野郎。
Shaking, Jessica looked between the paper and Ronove's face several times. At that time, George, who had been called out after Jessica, could be seen in the arbor of the rose garden. If things had gone normally, he planned to give Shannon the ring that would be proof of their engagement, here at this time, on this day. But the woman in front of George now was not Shannon.
読みなさい。それがゴールドスミスからあなたに与えられるテストよ。
George picked up the Western envelope, which was on the table where he had once had tea with Shannon, and read its contents. Perhaps its message was short. After glancing at it, George's eyes grew sharp.
なんだい
見ての通りよ。それがあなたに与えられる次期当主の資格を探るテスト。次期当主としての資格を自らに問いながら、その問いに答えなさい。
なんてバカな問題だ。
そうね、本当にバカな問題ね。ならゴールドスミスにとっての後ろ宮家の家督なんてその程度のものなんじゃない
George lowered his eyes to the surface of the letter once again, examining its contents. George and Jessica, while the tests given to them were slightly different, they were almost exactly the same.
以下に掲げる3つのうち2つを得るために1つを生贄に捧げよう。
簡単な3択じゃない。どれを見殺しに選ぶか自ら決めなさい。選択を拒めばテストは中断。私の手であなたをこの場で殺してしまってもいいって許可をもらってるわ。それさえも選択肢に含めるなら4択ね。私君みたいなこと遊ぶのは随分久しぶりだからそれも嫌いじゃないわよ。
この3択はあくまでもテストなのか、それとも選択は結果を伴うのか。
何を甘えてるの。君が選択したものは必ず命を落とす。
Among the three mentioned below, in order to gain 2, sacrifice 1. 1, your life. 2, Shannon's life. 3, everyone else's lives. If you do not choose one, all the above will be lost.
どうしてシャノンの名がここにあるんだ。
2番目の選択肢にはそのものが最も必要とする愛する者の名が。ジェシカへのテストの2番にはカノンって書かれているはずだわ。
このバカな問題をジェシカにも出したのかい。
ジェシカのことなんかどうでもいいでしょ。今試されているのはあなたよ。実に簡単な3択だわ。他の2つのためにどれを捨てられるかということよ。簡単でしょ。それでも決まらないならコインでも貸してあげようかしら。
コイン2面しかないものでどうやって3択を。
自分の命を捨てられる者がいるわけがないとなればおのずと残る選択肢は2つになる。愛する者のために全ての人間を諦めるか、一人でも多くを救うために愛する者一人を諦めるか。どっちにももっともらしい大義名分がつけられるわ。だって今やこの六軒島は悪魔の島ですもの。人間の世界の甘ったるい馴れ合いなんて必要ないの。誰も責めないわ。あなたの心の赴くままに。後ろ宮家の家督を継ぐにふさわしい資格が自らにあるかを問いながら。いいえ、自らが後ろ宮家当主であると思って選択なさい。
にしやがって。
Jessica crumpled the letter up and threw it on the floor.
お怒りはごもっともと思いますよ。私も非常にお気の毒で、それでいて実に滑稽な出題だと思います。
自分から死にたいと願う人間なんているもんか。そして愛する人の命を見捨てて生き残りたいと思う人間なんているもんか。 そして自分たちだけ良ければ他の人間全てを見殺しにできる人間なんているもんか。
いいえ、ジェシカ様、いても良いのでございますよ。ここは六軒島、悪魔の島。今や人間の世界から完全に切り取られ、魔界にどっぷりチーズフォンデュのように沈んでおります。人の世の価値観など次の燃えないゴミの日に出してしまいますともですからどうかジェシカ様が心より欲するものを順にお選びください。その結果残ったものがこの狂った今宵にふさわしきジェシカ様の回答となりましょう。
ふざけるな！こんなのどれも選べるものかよ。
いずれも選ばねば上記の全てを失うも立派な第四の選択肢でございます。それを選ばれるのもまた一興でございましょう。ただそれを選び結局自らの命を落とされるなら潔く一番の自分の命を選び他の二つを救われた方が賢明かと思いますよ。全てはジェシカ様の選択に委ねられます。どうぞ後ろ宮家の跡継ぎにふさわしい回答とその信念をお聞かせくださいませ。この炉の上親方様の血を引きし末裔にふさわしき素晴らしい回答を心より期待いたしております。
くしょ
That scene was observed through the magic circle ball that Kinzo held. Kinzo finally couldn't hold it back and, spreading his arms facing the heavens, began laughing in an explosive voice.
何を迷うか愚かなる孫たちよ、我が末裔たちよ。即答できる簡単な問題ではないか。朝のトーストにバターを塗るかジャムを塗るかより迷わぬ選択であるというのに。お前たちには正しい答えがわかるか？
Turned to face the Chaser sisters, who had been waiting for on him.
いえ申し訳ございません。私にはわかりません。ゴールドスミス教。
愚か者め、選べもせぬとはな。自らの生きる理由も目的も見出せん愚かなウサギめ。貴様など誰にも気づかれずに踏み潰されて生を終えるアリ一匹ほどの価値もないわ。死ね、潰れろ。私が瞬きしている間に消えてなくなれ。お前はどうか？
私は一番の自分の命を生贄とするであります。武具は戦い、知ってこそであります。そして武具は敵を撃ち滅ぼし味方を守るためにある。愛する者たちを守って死ねるなら本望であります。
ほう、武具らしい実に見事な模範回答よ。即答大いに結構。そう答えれば人参が一本余計にもらえると教えられてきたのか？違うよな。それすらも違うよな。そう聞かれたらそう答えようとお前はただ吹き込まれた通りに答えたに過ぎない。お前も今のウサギと同じだ。自分の生きる理由と目的を未だに見出せずに生きている。生きる価値なきクズめ。貴様など潰されて他の家畜の餌にでもなるのがお似合いよ。
はっ、家畜の餌
光栄であります。
違うだろう。もう誰も死ぬところを見たくないんだろう。それがなぜ認められぬのか。認めろよ。お前の古傷の奥の奥が未だに産んで腐っていることを。腐臭にて鼻が曲がりそうであるわ。愚かなる腐れウサギめ。お前にはこれが褒め言葉である。
ありがとうございます。であります。
さて最後のお前はどうか。この3択から何を選ぶ？
にひ、迷うことなく当然2番であります。
おお、2番か。愛する者を生贄に捧げることを胸を張って選べる者は多くない。訳を聞かせよ。
愛する者はいつかいなくなるからです。愛する者がいなければ傷つかないし、いなくてもいつかまた誰かを愛せるかもしれない。だから今愛してる者なんて大した価値はないのですに。にひ
なるほど。それでそういう回答になるわけか。愛に傷ついたがゆえに臆病になったウサギよ。ウサギは寂しさで死ぬと聞いたが、お前の心は一体いつ殺されたというのか。ならばウサギよ、問いを変えよう。2番の選択肢を愛するものではなく、そなたが愛したものの思い出に変えようではないか。どうかこれでももう一度選べるか。何が愛してるものに大した価値はないだ、愚かなウサギよ。自らの愛の深さにも向かい合えぬクズめ。選んでみよ。愛したものを忘れられると選んでみや。選べるだろう。選べるものな。ほら選べるって言ってみろよ。
選べるであります。選べるであります。
ゴールドスミス卿、それくらいでどうかお許しを。
もうよいわ、クズウサギどもめ。お前たちはワルギリアのところへ行き、地下牢の見張りを手伝うのだ。消えよ。
Chase their sisters with the respective old wounds of the heart gouged out, escaped by disappearing. After that, even though there was no one to hear, Kinzo continued talking by himself as though in a play.
と、このように愉快なテストなわけだ。実のところを言えば、これが正解という選択肢はない。むしろどの答えであろうとも、よどみなく素早く、そして確固たる信念と揺るがぬ強き自らの意志で選べるかどうか。その理由と意志の方が重要なのだ。私はそれを知りたいのだよ。ああ、我が末裔たちよ。お前たちはどのような答えを見せてくれるのか、実に楽しみだ。私かああ、もちろん同じ問いを突きつけられたことがあったとも。その悪魔の問いに見事答えたからこそ、私は黄金と名誉とあの魔女を我が物とすることができたのだよ。私が選んだ答えはどれか。 言うまでもないよな。なあ
さて、そろそろ答えは決まりましたでしょうか？
Jessica stared at the letter that had been crushed and lay on the floor. She hung her head in constant silence. All that filled the room was the stir from the wind and rain shaking the treetops. Regardless of how noisy that was, it actually made the stillness more apparent. Reneve waited for Jessica's answer. However, Jessica didn't answer. Whether she was lost in deep thought and stopped thinking, Reneve couldn't tell. No, he might have actually have known. But cruelly, like a demon, Reneve urged Jessica to voice it.
どれも選べないというなら、そのお命、せめて痛みがないよう安らかに頂戴させていただきますが、さて。
せよ。
はい、聞こえかねました。もう一度お願いできますかな。
Jessica lifted her face and looked straight into Reneve's eyes. It seemed that she had decided on her answer.
殺せよ。
Jessica said it one more time, clearly. Perhaps Reneve had imagined that this would be her answer from the very beginning. Without any surprise, he smiled lightly and nodded.
ジェシカ様なら、そのお答えを選ぶと思っておりました。さて、このテストは、どの選択肢が正解、不正解というものではありません。重要なのは、どのような考えを経てその答えに至ったかという部分です。さあ、ジェシカ様の、そして次期当主としての心構えを持って、それをお答えください。
別に、死にたくて1番目を選んだわけじゃないさ。2番の、カノン君を死なせること。こんなの、もちろん論外。だから除外。3番の、その他みんなの命。こんなのも、もちろん論外。だから除外。そしたら、1番目の選択肢しか残らなかった。
消去法ですか。積極的にお選びになったわけではないと。
After chuckling slightly, Reneve dropped his gaze. A human couldn't even imagine what answer a demon would have been expecting. All she could understand was that this was apparently slightly below Reneve's expectations.
悪くはありませんが、良くもない回答です。60点というところでしょうか。少し失望しましたよ。
自信を持って選べみたいなこと言っておいて、そうしてやったら失望とは自分勝手な野郎だぜ。
消去法というだけではないようですね。いずれにせよ落第点ですが、もう少しお考えがあるようだ。伺いましょう。
死にたくないさ。だから一番なんて誰だって選びたくない。人は幸せに生きたくて生の限りをあがいてるんだぜ。だから本当はまず1番目なんてありえないはずなんだ。
しかしあなたは1番目の選択肢、自分の命を捨てることを選んだ。その選択肢しか残らなかった。
一応それぞれの選択肢を選んだ後の未来のことを考えてみたぜ。
ほう、いかがでしたか？
まずカノン君を死なせてみた。私は自分の大好きな人を見捨ててまで生きる残りの生涯を想像してみた。
それはどんな生涯でしたか？
生きるにも値しない最低の女だった。いつまでも自らの選択を悔やみ、ただ後悔だけのために生きる 大好きな人を見捨てて生きることを選んだ最低の女なんて私には許せない。私が自ら引導を渡してやる。
勇ましい。では3番目の選択肢も考えられたのでは？
あ、私とカノン君以外の全員を死なせても見た。カノン君はそんな私を好きになるはずはない。そして私もまた、いくらカノン君がいても、そのために見捨てた大勢の命が生涯十字架となってのしかかってきた。そしてその十字架はカノン君にまでのしかかった。私はカノン君に十字架を背負わせるために愚かな選択肢を選んだりはしない。もしそんなことをする私がいたなら、私はその未来の私を許さない。その女にも私が引導を渡してやる。
Jessica had pictured it in her mind. The future her beyond each of the three choices. There were three Jessicas. Of the three, two had regrets. Only one could hold her head high and smile at Canon.
私さ、生意気にもカノン君に説教したことがあるぜ。自分の人生を思い切り生きてみろみたいなことを。
自分の人生を思い切り生きる。味わいある言葉ですね。それは意外にとても難しいものです。
だからさ、私が胸を張ってカノン君に見せなきゃならないんだよ。胸を張ってお天道様を真正面から見て、思い切り笑顔でいられる生き方ってやつを。
あなたの自己犠牲をカノンは受け入れられるでしょうか。あなたの身勝手な選択が余計に彼を傷つけてしまうことには思いが至りませんか？
だから伝言を頼みたい。
ほう、お聞きはしますが、何しろ私は悪魔です。約束は守らないかもしれませんよ。
守って約束。
Jessica spoke without looking quite unconcerned. She had asked the demon who was about to take her life to pass on a message, and she didn't think at all that she would be betrayed. At that extremely innocent smile, Renove closed his eyes slightly and shrugged his shoulders.
いいでしょう。それで彼に何と伝えればよろしいですか？
カノン君の思いっきりの人生を生きて。ちょっと違う。カノン君のじゃない。本当の名前は未だに教えてもらえないけど、本当のカノン君の人生を思いっきり生きて、そう伝えて。
お嬢様。
ジェシカ、お前というやつは。
炉の上は気まぐれですから、伝言をしなかった可能性もありました。幸運でしたね。私がこの光景を見せていて。
A musty three-sided mirror was set beyond the bars, and the scene with Jessica was reflected on it. On the next mirror, the scene with George was reflected in the same way. None of them questioned how a three-sided mirror had appeared from a group of butterflies, nor did they wonder why these scenes of Jessica and George were reflected on it, because the reflected scenes themselves were more important.
そこまでこいつのために命をも投げ出せるというのか。
申し訳ありません。
Cross looked at Canon with a complicated expression mixed in with a bitter smile. Canon wouldn't meet his eyes.
ワルギリア様、お嬢様が命を落とされることはありません。僕を殺してください。2番目の選択肢にそれで全ては丸く収まるはずです。
その願いを私に叶えることはできませんよ。これはジェシカの選んだ自らの選択なのですから。
At that time, suddenly the air split and the Chaser Sisters appeared, flying into Vergilia's chest.
アルギリア様ひどいんですひどいんですコールラス・ベス教がひどいんです
私だって頑張ってるのであります。潰して家畜の餌とかあんまりであります。
Vergilia, who still didn't have a clue what was going on, was mauled by the sobbing Chaser Sisters.
はいはい、大丈夫ですよ、大丈夫ですよ。なかなか美味しいお紅茶を入れてあげますからね。お前たち、ここの見張りを任せます。不審な真似をしたらすぐに知らせるのですよ。
The guard attendants all faced each other, nodding their heads. Vergilia took the Chaser Sisters and left. The sound of them going up the stairs could be heard, so they had probably gone up to an upper floor.
チャンスだわ。このヤギ頭どもは頭が悪いみたい。うまく騙せないかしら。
Kyrie realized that an opportunity had arrived, but even so, she hadn't thought of a way to break the metal bars. The Jessica reflected on the three-sided mirror had her eyes closed, as though in contemplation. The way she had both hands stuck in her pockets, wanting to be defiant until the very end, might have been her own aesthetic stance.
私の言い分は以上だ。殺せよ。
わかりました。それではご安心を。あなたへの死はどんな眠りよりも優しく慈悲深いものにいたしますよ。
As Renove raised his palm, he slowly approached Jessica.
くそー
Realizing that his daughter was about to be killed, Cross went half mad and repeatedly body slammed the metal bars. The ghosts looked like they were sneering at how a mere human didn't stand a chance of breaking those bars. Cross's pointless efforts certainly may have been comical, but Cross was giving it everything he had. He was now living with all he had as Jessica's father so that he could save her. He kind of made tight fists with both hands. If he used his cursed power, he might be able to cut through even metal bars. But there were a full 3 goats. There's no way he could defeat 3 of them in an instant. It would be instantly reported, and even then Vergilia and the Chaser Sisters would probably dash in. Even if he could break the bars, that would be the end of it. It was useless. Canon already knew that the witch sneered at useless efforts like that, so he could do nothing but stare at Cross's repeated body slams.
庄司様。
Shannon, who had been looking at the 3-sided mirror, raised her voice. When they looked, they could see George, who had been silent the whole time, lift his face. It seemed that George had also decided on an answer.
決まった？君の答え。
ああ、決まったよ。
それは揺るぎない答え？
ああ、揺るぎないね。
なら聞かせてもらうわ。ああ、ちなみにジェシカはどうも自分の命を差し出すことを選んだようよ。まさか優柔不断な君も同じ答えを選んだって言うんじゃないでしょうね。
ジェシカはジェシカの答えを出したのさ。それがどの選択であろうとも、それはジェシカの答えだ。僕の答えに何も干渉しないよ。
そうなら改めて聞くわ。以下に掲げる3つのうち2つを得るために1つを生贄に捧げる。1、自分の命。2、シャノンの命。3、それ以外の全員の命。あなたが選んだのはどれ？まさかジェシカと同じ1番？
違うね。
へえ。
Gap looked a little surprised, because she had thought that this timid-looking man would obviously choose that option.
ならよかったわ。私にとって一番退屈な選択肢が外れてくれてよかった。じゃあまさかとは思うけど2番シャノンの命を 見捨ててみせる？
まさか今夜まさに婚約指輪を贈ろうという相手をどうして僕が。
これは大胆だわ。それが君の答えなの？
そうさ。僕の答えは3番さ。
George took the third option, everyone else's lives. Unsurprisingly, Gap hadn't imagined that he'd give an answer like that. She had been sure that he'd choose the same one as Jessica, so she was interested in how he had reached that answer. How he had reached an answer that had surpassed the imagination of the 33rd ranked of the 72 demons.
聞かせてほしいわ。自分と愛する婚約者だけが無事で、それ以外の全てを犠牲にできる境地というのを聞かせてほしいわ。あなたもジェシカと同じで消去法というやつ？
違うね。はっきりこれしか僕には選択肢がないのさ。
自分さえ良ければいいと？愛する女と引き換えに世界を犠牲にできると？
君は何を言っているんだい？
何？
George faced the demon as he spoke, almost as though he was disgusted.
僕は今夜ここにシャノンを呼び出し、婚約の証である指輪を渡すつもりだった。僕とシャノンの婚約を祝福しない者もきっと多いだろう。僕は彼女との婚約を宣言することで親族すべてを敵に回すと覚悟していた。僕にはあるんだよ。この島に訪れたその時から。いや違う。彼女に婚約したいと打ち明けたその時からね。
結婚さえできれば他の何もかも犠牲にできると？
結婚とは自分は生涯妻の味方であり続けるということだ。僕にはその時点で彼女のために世界の全てを敵に回す覚悟があるんだ。
Those words through the three-sided mirror also reached Shannon's ears, and that determination reached her eyes. Shannon certainly had promised to be given an engagement ring tonight. Then this incident had occurred, and she hadn't been able to receive the ring. But now, even though it wasn't in the form of a ring, Shannon had received something even greater. And as proof of that, a single tear in the same sparkle as a diamond dripped down.
それは何とも振るった答えだことね。なるほど。よく考えたら君にこれは気楽な選択肢だわ。だって君の両親は第一の晩にすでに殺されちゃってるんだもんね。今さら君にとって死んで困る人間は誰もいない。なるほどね。これは簡単な選択だったわ。
何とでも言うがいい。これが僕の、そして僕の次期当主としての覚悟と選択だ。
The sparkle in George's eyes was brilliantly sharp. For just an instant, Gap felt the same sense of threat as Kinzo's, and was slightly overwhelmed.
なるほど。ゴールドスミスと同じ答え。というわけ、君もあどけなさそうな顔して、将来はとんだ悪魔になるわけね。なんだ、私たちとてもうまくやれそうじゃない。君がゴールドスミスの後を継ぐ。そしてやがては私は召喚され、君に仕えることもあるかもしれない。それも案外面白いかもしれないわね。
Gap had needed to change her opinion of George. This man bore determination and resolve unimaginable from his outward appearance, and not just now, but since the very beginning.
僕には今すぐ当主を継承する覚悟がある。いや違うね。君はこのテストを当主として考えろと言った。だから僕は自分が当主であると前提して答えたんだ。 いや、それすら違う。当主そのものとして考えた。僕は今後宮家の当主なんだ。
見事だわ。そこまで言えるなんてね。君はどうやらかなりの大物だわ。バトラとマリアのテストはまだだけど、私は君が合格でいい気がする。でもその答えがかけねなしの本当のものならね。
僕の覚悟を疑うというのか。
君が選んだ選択肢を実行できる？今すぐ自らの手でこの島に存在する全ての命を生贄に捧げることができる？自らの手でよ。
できるね。その覚悟はあると僕は何度も言っている。
ならば今すぐゲストハウスに戻り、バトラとマリアを殺しなさい。それが終わったら他の人質たちも連れてきてあげる。君の手でシャノン以外の全員をその目の前で処刑してみせるのよ。できるんでしょ？
できるね。僕の覚悟は君程度のそれとはレベルが違う。
ならば実行しなさい。全てに死を。新しき後宮家の当主としてこの血塗られた儀式の遂行を。
了解したよ。実行する。僕は今やもう後宮家の当主だ。
ええ、そうよ。自らの手でその玉座を赤く染めなさい。君は悪魔たちを統べる魔界の王となる。
Gap was convinced. This man truly was fitting to succeed Kinzo's madness.
吹けよ嵐、鳴らせよ雷鳴。新しき魔王の誕生を祝うがいい。悪魔の島は今新しい王を迎えた。
In response to the demon's call, a tempest raged even more and more. Then, a massive lightning bolt fell, its tearing thunder and brilliant light giving the sensation of a moment of silence.
でさ、その殺害の順番だけど、僕が決めていいわけだよね。
どうぞご自由に。新しき六軒島の魔王陛下、あなたの御心の赴くままに。
とりあえずさ、その一番目が君になるわけだけど、いいかな？
え？
A gust of wind blew, stirring up George's jacket as if it were a cloak. It was very much like the cloak worn by the head. It definitely carried the impression of dignity. At that time, Gap truly did see the storm wipe away, and the sky covered with pure white and vast full moon. The man who called himself the New Head bore the full moon on his back and sneered at the demon.
後宮家親族の全ての命さえも今や僕の財産だ。それに損害を出してくれた賠償、安くは済まないよ。まさか僕の両親に夏日おばさん、ルドルフおじさん、ローザおばさん、そして源氏さんの命を奪っておいて、この僕が見逃すと本気で思ってるのかい？
はは生意気よ。
Mornay was trying to press his palm against Jessica's chest and stop her heart, but right before he could, his hand stopped. On the carpet at their feet, two small red flowers bloomed with a plop plop. The seeds of those flowers was way up high, piercing into the heavens, on Jessica's fist. Mornay's nose was stained red with spewing blood, and those drops had been dripping onto the carpet.
ちなみにさっきのは乙女としての回答 次期当主としての回答は別だぜ。
お伺いします。
大好きな人も家族も親族もみんな私が守る。私が当主ならそれは私の責務だ。お父さんは威張ってるだけじゃない。私や母さんを守ってた。後宮家を受け継ぐ重圧ってやつと何十年も戦ってた。だからわかるぜ、次期当主ってのはな、軽くねえんだよ。だからさ、捨てられるんだよ、自分の命くらい。簡単にかけられちまうんだよ。
Jessica knew. She knew that in order to protect her family, her father had bluffed and fought alone continuously. Jessica understood something that his back had been telling her. Another left straight was buried into Ronovit's face. That terrifying strike wasn't due to just the brass knuckles she was using. It was a strike of a person, a family head, who could throw away everything in order to protect.
父さんが次期当主の資格を失ったなら、順当に次の当主は私が継承するぜ。後宮家当主、後宮ジェシカ。これ以上好きにさせるほどふぬけちゃいねえぜ。
素晴らしい回答です。先ほどの点数を改めましょう。その回答に10点プラス、見事な左ストレートに10点プラス
ってことは、あと20点プラスで100点満点だな。
As Renovate jumped backwards, somersaulting in midair, he violently wiped away the blood pouring from his nose. It had become not blood, but petals of a red nose. The blood on his face was wiped off, and in its place was a grin filled with delight that he hadn't felt in many centuries that he couldn't remember.
ジェシカ様の覚悟、何点に値するかどうか、この炉の上、試させていただきますよ。
うぜえぜ、かかってきやがれ。
おいで、奈落へ。
Suddenly, beneath George's feet, a pitch-black pitfall opened its mouth wide. Of course, George had no way of resisting. After being swallowed up by that, George fell out of the pitch-black hole that had opened up in the ceiling of the arbor. As George fell down, he was hit by a reverse roundhouse kick from a sharp stiletto heel, like a strike from a carefully aimed bee. The instant George, after being blown back from the arbor, thought that he'd be swallowed up by the rose bush, another pitch-black hole opened there and swallowed George up. And this time a pitch-black hole opened at Gap's feet before her eyes, splitting a defenseless George out of it. At that time, Gap had already finished preparatory motions for the next reverse roundhouse kick.
これは。
おかえりなさい。
Right side of the head, below the right armpit, side of the right knee. As Gap danced and spun around like a small cyclone, she kept hitting him. Left foot, right foot, right foot, with successive roundhouse kicks. The fourth one became a sweep, cutting George's feet from under him and making him fall down. But of course, there was no floor there, but a pitch-black hole, and George was swallowed up once again. Gap once again spun around like a small cyclone. George was once again spat from the ceiling of the arbor.
食らって噛み締めなさい。奈落の終点が一撃。死ね。
The sharp strike of the queen bee pierced the heavens like a rising cyclone. It kicked through George's lower chest as he fell from the ceiling. And then, time froze. George was pinned in midair by Gap's raised leg. Still pinned in midair, George moaned. Then Gap, with George still hung up on her foot, grinned.
認めてあげるわ。君の態度だけは一人前よ。でも、力が伴わなきゃダメだわ。知ってる？この世を滑るには3つの力が必要だそうよ。一つは権力。 一つは財力、最後は何か知ってる？
本で読んだよ。応力だろう。
正解。君にはそれが足りないわ。
Cat finally released George. She kicked upwards one more time, changing it into a roundhouse kick and knocking him into the pillar.
権力を伴わない王者にも、財力を伴わない王者にも、そして暴力を、金蔵はその3つを兼ね備えたわ。だからこそ暴君として君臨した。君も金蔵の後継者を名乗るならば、その貫禄を見せてごらんなさい。ほら、いつまで寝ているの？立ちなさい。じゃないとまた落ちるわよ。
悪くない動きですよ。しかしレディーには少々ふさわしくないかと存じます。
いやー、ひょろひょろと反撃してこねえのかよ。なめてんのか、うぜえやつ。
Ronove dodged skillfully, jumped back, and avoided Jessica's fist. But he still didn't strike back himself. Because of his dodge that was as rapid as a fluttering flag blown by strong winds, Jessica's fist wasn't able to touch him. Amidst the sensation that her own blood was boiling, Jessica regained her offensive composure. Even though this room was large for a bedroom, it was a very cramped place to keep up with such exaggerated dodges in for long. She calmly realized that and started using not just her fists, but her legs as well.
ほう、ボクシングは腕でやるだけのうちは半人前です。腕は熱く吠えたける獅子のように、そして足は冷たく獲物を狙って追い詰める蛇のように。
蛇に足はねえぜ。
確かに。
Jessica began cornering Ronove towards the wall with perfect footwork. She didn't let him get around her. Ronove's magnificent dodges looked flashy, but they needed large footing. Once cornered, he wouldn't be able to dodge anymore. Jessica knew the characteristics of her weapon, the brass knuckle, very well. This powerful weapon's most notable characteristic was how it didn't give an opponent a chance to defend. Even if they blocked with their arm, that arm would receive direct damage. If it hit the wrong way, it might even break the bone. So she cornered him. With this fist, she'd whittle away at the demon who'd lost any way of it to escape.
おっと、おや、いつ
ようやく追い詰めたぜ。みんなを捕らえている場所はどこだ。クソジジイのいる場所はどこだ。洗いざらい喋ったらそのヒゲをむしり取るだけで勘弁してやるぜ。
それは困ります。これでもセットに毎朝1時間をかけているのですから。
ギブスの世話になったらそれもできねえな。
おっと。
Ronove had blocked Jessica's fist with his arm. He tried to act as though it was no big deal, but it must have hurt a lot. Jessica grinned. Ronove smiled the same way, but twitched slightly.
なるほど。これは確かに痛いですね。
最終勧告。泣いて詫びる。
それはできませんね。キャラが崩れます。
ならお前が崩れ落ちるといいぜ。鶴瓶打ちだー。
Jessica's fists were buried into Ronove, but there was a larger resistance that seemed too hard. The sound of breaking glass which startled Jessica. At a glance, it looked like Ronove's hand had caught Jessica's fist with its palm. That wasn't quite true. When Ronove opened his hand, a faint purple glowing barrier, a glass shield appeared, stopping the attack by a hair's breadth. Pulling herself together, Jessica let her fist fly again, but with a truly magnificent gesture, Ronove caught all of them.
悪魔ですなんて、この程度の魔法くらいは。それにしてもなかなかやりますね。人間だったら私はここで降参だったでしょう。悪魔だからまだ戦い続けることができる。
おかしな真似を。
それで終わりですか？攻撃を繰り出すばかりでご自身の防御がおろそかではありませんか？
One of his palms shot with a hair's breadth of Jessica's stomach. Jessica was knocked away by the purple shield, rolled backwards and smashed her head on the bed.
人間ごときに私のシールドは破れませんよ。もう二度と私の体に触れることができると思わぬことです。
ならよ、そのシールドごとぶち抜いてやるぜ。
不屈な刀、その根性。なるほど、次期当主として実にふさわしい。もう少しお相手させていただきましょうかね。これも試験官の役得です。
砕けろ
Gav looked down at George, sneering. George was on a path in the rose garden, lying face down in a puddle. The merciless rain beat down on him, so it looked as though even the heavens were mocking him.
立ちなさい。また落ちるわよ。
George stood up shakily. It seemed his spirit hadn't given in, but the damage done to his body was fairly significant.
命乞いなさい。君のしていることは何も選ばない4番目の選択肢に同じ。君が選んだのは3番目の選択肢でしょ。両手両膝をついて詫びれば私への比例を許してあげるわ。そしたら君を地下牢へ案内してあげる。そこで君は愛するシャノンと非力な自分のために他の人質たちを一人ずつ殺していくの。できるわよね。その覚悟はあると君は豪語したわ。
George didn't answer, but his gaze was still obstinately resisting surrender.
あまり強情が過ぎると今度こそ奈落の底の底まで
Gap's strength was evident. That was probably clear, even more than it was to George himself, to Shan's group watching through the three-sided mirror.
庄司様、もうやめて。私なんかのために。
姉さん、
私のことなんて好きにならなければジョージ様は誰とも戦わなくていいんでしょう。なら私なんて捨ててください。忘れてください。
There was no way that voice could have reached George, but even so, George answered.
嫌だね。僕は屈服しない。
へえ、どうして？
それが僕の覚悟だからだ。僕はシャノンのために全てと戦う。そして全てに認めさせ、全てに僕たちを祝福させる。
ねえ、聞かせて。どうしてあのシャノンとかいう家具のためにそこまで言えるの？あんなのただの出来損ないじゃない。給仕一つ満足にできないガラクタ家具だわ。
愛する女性への暴言を僕はそれ以上許さない。
だったら何？ひ弱な僕ちゃんが私にどう抗うというのかしら。
人を愛するとは強さだ。それを知ったから僕は強くなれた。シャノン、僕は君を愛している。その言葉だけで僕は何度でも立ち上がれるんだ。
シャノンは地下牢よ。 私に愛を語られても。
いや、伝わった。それが愛だからだ。シャノンには今僕の言葉が聞こえているよ。そうだと信じられることこそが愛だ。
こいつ。
シャノン、君は家具なんかじゃない。家具だったとしても世界でただ一つの僕だけの家具だ。生涯僕と寄り添ってほしい。僕には君が永遠に必要だ。
庄司様。
焼けるわ。口説きならうちの人を超えたわね。
若さですな。
愛が強さなら坊やはどうしてそんなにひ弱なの？その弱さがつまり君の愛の程度なわけね。婚約者への愛もひ弱、両親のあっけない死に様もひ弱。君の人生は何から何までひ弱だわ。
シャノンは僕に愛と強さを教えてくれた。もし君が僕の強さだけでシャノンへの愛を確かめようというのなら、僕の愛を教えよ
う。言うわね。なるほど。何度も蹴り倒されて転がされ、それでも立ち上がるのがシャノンからもらった強さだと。ならあっけなく殺されたあんたのお父さんとお母さんからは何をもらったの？
At that time, there was a blackout. Even though they were outside.
違う。これは。
The thing blocking Gap's vision was the bottom of George's shoe.
側頭蹴り、尾骨骨折。
And it stopped right in front of the tip of Gap's nose.
母さんにもらったものはこの蹴りだ。
Several moments after, Gap jumped back. Of course, it was too late. If George hadn't stopped, he probably would have caused the damage he announced.
そして父さんにもらったのが忍耐力。
Anger with a low boiling point is something to be truly feared. True anger is disciplined by fortitude.
君の暴力的意思表示は理解した。また婚約者と両親への名誉毀損も理解した。そしてそれを撤回する気がないんだね。
こいつ。
君の攻撃はもう十分に理解したから。そろそろいいかな、反撃して。
ほざくな、坊やの分際で。
Fish black hole opened its mouth at George's feet. But George rapidly opened his legs, straddling the hole. The same move won't work on me again. It was an extremely smooth dodge, and the upper part of his body didn't even quiver.
忍耐とは熱くならず冷静に相手の出方を研究することだ。何のために？決まってるじゃないか。わかるかい？
わかんないわよ。
反撃してきっちり借りを返し、二度とちょっかいを出したくないと思わせ、涙と鼻水で顔面をぐちゃぐちゃにして、それを拭うのを忘れて、額を地面にこすりつけて何度も謝りたくなるほどに完膚なきまでに完璧叩きのめすためだよ。
George dashed. Pitfalls opened one after another, but George didn't step in them again. And because he was persistent, he was able to reach Gap a second time.
後ろ回し蹴り、顎部骨折。
It was stretched out more forcefully and beautifully than Gap had been. Of course, while it centered directly in Gap's face, it stopped a hair's breadth away. Perhaps he couldn't rely on pitfalls at this close range. Gap picked at George's shins as a diversion. In an instant of weakness when he tried to deal with that, she aimed a kick at his stomach. It was a bee-like stab by her stiletto heel, but it sliced through the air where George no longer was.
上段かかと落とし鎖骨骨折
By Gap's side, George calmly announced that his foot still raised. That a monarch's heel had been swung down. A collarbone fracture would probably be the least of her worries.
こいつ資金じゃ私より強いの距離を
She jumped backwards to open a large gap between them. She jumped and leapt and flipped in midair, increasing the distance. Should have been magnificent, but for some reason it was very similar to the movement of a small, scared animal. If she opened the distance between them, she'd be able to fight at the range that was her specialty, using a mixture of pitfalls and kicking techniques.
バカだ私を倒せるチャンスを3度も逃した傲慢奈落の底で後悔なさい
When she magnificently landed and tried to aim a pitfall, a razor-sharp wind cut by Gap's bangs. Yes, it cut them. It happened twice. This time it didn't just stop a hair's breadth away, but scattered her bangs with its air pressure.
アルマーダ・コン・マルテーロ第一撃で眼底骨折第二撃で脳挫傷
Gap was too shocked to speak. George had closed in over that distance in an instant, letting off a fearsomely nimble mid-air kick. Furthermore, with the accuracy and edge of a razor, it had cut nothing more than several of her bangs.
空手で蹴りの威力をテコンドーで速度カポエイラでは自在の間合いを学んだ母さんが色々と移り気でねでも色々と特徴を学べて勉強になったよ
なぜ当てない私が女だからとでも言うのか
君は王者の力として3つ目に暴力と言ったね君はどうやらまだその暴力の意味を誤解しているようだこの場合の暴力とはね短絡的に振るわれる乱暴のことを言うんじゃない敵対すれば無傷では済まないという抑止のことを指すんだよ
抑止だと
In short, this is what it meant. This is why all of George's attacks up until then had stopped a hair's breadth away. These bare misses, which were more difficult than hitting directly, had all been performed so splendidly. Also, if George had wished it, any one of those would probably have crushed Gap. He had daringly not done that.
君も言ったろ暴力は滑る力だと暴力で相手を破壊してしまったら滑られないじゃないか王者の暴力とはね破壊しない屈服させて自らの財産とするんだからね君に泡でも吹かれたらみんなの囚われてる場所に案内させられないよ
Gap had to admit it. She had to admit that George understood force in its truest sense.
みんなのところへ案内してもらうよ抵抗はおすすめしないもう寸止めはしないよ
ごめんねリアあんたの兵隊借りさせて私一人じゃ手に負えないわこいつ
As a large pitch-black hole opened in the sky, 3 muscular goat attendants fell out. They surrounded George.
増援会それは僕がひ弱であることを撤回したと受け止めていいのかな
認めるわあんたの人間の力を侮ってたわ
違うねこれが愛を覚えた男の強さなのさ
ほざけ臭いことをシャーシャーとさあヤギたちその男を潰して肉団子にしてやりなさいこのヤギたちはバカだけどパワーだけはあるみたいよあんたの死体婚約者にも見分けがつかなくしてあげるわ
降伏拒否並びに継戦の意思了解したい 以後は君の攻撃に等しい分だけ君に実害が及ぶことを宣言する。僕をまだ攻撃するつもりなら相応の損害を受けることになると覚悟するがいいよ。
George proclaimed that a faint red magic circle rose up around him. Seeing that George couldn't see it, however Gap, being a demon, could.
魔法？どうしてこいつが防御結界を？しかもそれ反撃特化。それがあんたの抑止という意味。
From a demon's perspective, that may have been magic, but in George's eyes, it was determination. It was a determination filled with certainty, which would be merciless to anyone who wished to fight anymore, and which would force them to prepare for a significant counterattack. Determination with certainty becomes magic. Renove had been accurately blocking Jessica's fist with his shield, but something felt odd. Even though he was certainly catching them with his shield, he felt his arm get jarred, and it hurt. Should have prevented all physical damage. However, the damage from her fist was gradually being transmitted to his arm, piling up. Renove tried to act like he was composed so that he wouldn't be noticed.
私はバテねえぜ。どうしたよおっさん。ちっとは答えてきたかよ。
いくら攻撃しようとも無駄ですよ。私のシールドはあなたには砕けないとどうしてわからないのです？
砕けないからってよ、殴るのをやめはしないぜ。どんな固い試みだって言葉はわずかずつ響き、やがてはひびを入れることだってできるんだ。私は信じてる。この世に無駄な努力なんて存在しないってな。だから生きるんだろ、思いっきり。言葉だっていつか通じるなら拳だって同じってことだぜ。私の辞書には諦めるって文字は書いちゃいねえんだぜ。
Those words were probably aimed at Cannon. Cannon, who had seemed to reject Jessica's words. But Jessica knew that no matter how stubborn his heart was, those words would eventually soak through. She believed that they would eventually reach his heart, and that day would come when he would stop calling himself furniture and disparaging himself, and they'd step into a new life. So Jessica didn't give up. She didn't lose heart.
バカみてえだろ。男には理解できねえだろ。恋する乙女ってのはな、無駄だから諦めるって考えがねえんだぜ。
At that time, Renove certainly saw. He saw the reddish glow of light that had circled Jessica's fist.
これは参りました。エンチャントですか。浸透付与とは厄介。
Inside her unrelenting fist and determination dwelled the power to succeed no matter what. From a demon's perspective, that was magic. Determination with certainty becomes magic.
な、無駄なんてことはねえだろ。通ってんだろ、私の拳。腕をかばってるぜ、おっさん。
もう少し本気を出さざるを得ないようですね。おっしゃる通りのようです。この世に無駄なことなどない。
そうさ、無駄なんて諦めたらそこで人生が終わっちまうぜ。通じるんだよ、絶対に。
I'm an idiot, so this is the only way I can live. But even so, I'm sure I'll be able to teach Cannon-kun about a new world someday. So I'm not gonna lose heart in a place like this. I'll definitely defeat you, and save everyone.
くそ！なんとか隙間を！
Cross was repeating his useless effort to somehow open a hole between the metal bars. Useless. Nothing is useless. There's nothing. The lookout goats had been swallowed up by those black pitfalls and disappeared. Now is their once-in-a-lifetime chance. This is their only chance to break the bars.
よせ、無茶だ。クラウスさん。素手でどうにかなるもんじゃない。道具を探しましょう。 無茶をするんじゃない。
無駄と諦めたらそれまでと娘に言われてしまった。私の体は無理でも小柄なシャノンかカノンが抜けられれば。
この段階に至っては出ない知恵を絞るより行動あるのみね。力を合わせましょう。私もやるわ。カノン君、男の子でしょ。手を貸して。カノン君、
旦那様、下がってください。
何をする気だ。
いいよね、姉さん。もう一度だけあがいても。
私ももう一度だけあがくよ。一度だけじゃない。何度でも。
Jessica's voice had reached canon. It certainly had permeated into his cold, rock-like heart. And George's voice had reached Shannon. If the love he had shown was embodied by strength, she would have to respond the same way. An incredible metal sound rang out. In the first flash, several metal bars were severed horizontally, and in the next flash they were severed horizontally again, causing many metal bars to clatter to the ground like bamboo shoots cut by a sword. Kraus, Kirie, and Nanjo didn't have any clue what just happened.
南條先生、お屋敷や廊下をどっちに？
左奥だ、左奥。
参りましょう、旦那様方。すぐにワルギリア様に気づかれます。
あんたたちは一体何なの？
僕たちは。
When Cannon hung his head a little and faltered, Shannon slapped his shoulder and smiled and spoke.
私たちは人間です。ワルギリア様！警戒網に反応、脱獄です。なぜか見張りのヤギがいません。
どうしてです？ガープですね。人の召喚物を勝手に。ガプ。
交戦規定確認。脱走者への射殺許可を申請であります。
おやりなさい。やっちゃいなさい。ガプ。ギャー！
了解であります。45、410、追撃狙撃戦準備。弾手、収束誘導弾。ワルギリア様、逃亡阻止結界を。
そうでしたね。ここから逃がしはしませんよ。ガプ言ってたら舌噛みました。
The underground passage in front of them was once again blocked by metal bars. The door was, of course, locked. However, that was no problem for them now.
カノン、また鉄格子だ。頼む。
はい、旦那様。
しかしすごいわ。一体どういう原理なのかしら。
原理など興味ないで。大事なのは彼に鉄格子が切断できてここから脱出できることだけだ。気にするなカノン、やれ。
お任せを。
Cannon sliced the metal bars again with his red curved blade, but there was a harsh, strange noise, and the metal bars had only had a slight scratch.
なんと、これは頑丈な。
違う、エンチャントされてる。ワルギリア様の魔法錠だ。
切断できる？
もちろん。でも時間をかけるよ。
3分間待ってやる。
After taking a deep breath and concentrating his mind, Cannon extended a red curved sword again. When he pressed it hard against the metal bars, sparks sprayed, almost as if he was melting through it with a burner.
切断はできそうだが手こずりそうだな。
旦那様、 様、敵に捕捉されました。下がってください。
追って誰も来てないわよ。
私の後ろに下がってください。狙われてます。45データ治療。標的は捕捉。地形誤差修正。射撃曲線形成。制御点補正完了。410データリンク。410データ受領。危険区域確認。問題なし。
WO 師団装填48発、個別収束誘導弾準備完了。
45射撃準備完了。収束誘導弾装填。410にひひひ射撃。
A golden arrow that sparkled gold was fired, leaving a gold trail streaming behind. It drew a curve, went through a door, went through a keyhole, down the stairs, towards the underground path at full speed.
何か光りましたぞ。
黄金の矢はシールドで防げない。カノン君、迎撃態勢。リンクしよ
う。ゲートキーパー了解。姉さんと一緒に戦うのは久しぶりだ。動じらないでよ。
本気でやる。
なら問題ない。
Shannon stopped cutting the bars and stood in front of Shannon. Behind him, Shannon closed her eyes, concentrating her mind deep in the darkness of the underground path. A guide clustered around is a special kind of arrow made up of 48 sub-rounds bound together. It explodes mid-flight and divides into 48 mini arrows. The strength of each individual one is low, but they pierce through all shields and possess perfect wounding and killing power against personnel. On top of that, each one of the 48 possesses autonomous guidance towards their individual targets.
分裂した。
収束誘導弾分裂確認。師団46、7、8、48全弾捕捉。迎撃完成。カノンデータリンク。
カノンデータ受領。姉さんの能力はすごいな。48発全部見える。
迎撃優先順位に注意。姉さんを信じて。
もちろんさ。僕は目を開ける必要さえない。
迎撃開始。目標健在。迎撃されました。48発全部。
シャノンとカノンはもともと一組の家具ですからね。揃うと手強いこと。あいたたた、これ口内炎になっちゃうかしら。
落ち着け。再装填弾種を変更。精密高速狙撃弾精密狙撃戦準備。
そりゃいいね。追撃不能の超高速弾。ゲートキーパーごときじゃ防御不能だに。精密狙撃戦了解。精密射撃用データ収集開始。
一体今のは何なんだ。
安心して。私にもさっぱりよ。一つわかるのは二人に頼らなきゃ死んでたってことね。
カノン君ありがとう。鉄格子に戻って。多分次のは迎撃できない弾が来る。
そんな攻撃をどう防ぐんだ。
撃たせません。カノン君霊視線防備。
At those words, Cannon closed his eyes tightly and ground his teeth. With Shannon at the center, a pressure and impact that only non-humans could perceive struck.
あれ？射撃システムエラー。ダメだ、再起動。あれ
霊波妨害。霊視防護急げ。何をしてるか。早く耳を塞げ。45。
An unseen, unheard impact that struck the Chaser sisters. Double O and 410 crouched down, covering their ears, but 45 didn't make it in time. As she stood bolt upright, her eyes rolled.
45損傷。コンパイラのエンジンがいっちゃったよ。いや、私もノイズがひどい
45、410、そして WO 損傷、狙撃戦を断念。リンクでもろに来た。再起動しないと。
Raising their spirit particle sensitivity for precision sniping had backfired. They had taken the full brunt of the spirit particle shockwave Shannon had released. Not only 45 who had been hit directly, but also 00 and 410 who had been linked with her were taken down.
大丈夫ですか？後でまた美味しい紅茶を入れてあげますからね。しっかり。
申し訳ございませんであります。再起動をかけます。数百秒ほどお待ちを。
All the chasers had fallen over. They would probably get back up eventually, but it looked like it would be hard for them to return to the battle lines for a while.
家具が武具を一時的にとはいえ退けますか。なるほど。あの子の面白がる筋書きは実に大番狂わせが多いこと。
Regalia tore the air with a large gesture, motioning as though opening a door.
さあさあおいでなさい。ヤギの従者たち。 お仕事の時間ですよ。脱走者たちを殺して捕らえなさい。死体でいいのですよ。どうせ蘇生できるし。
The gold-colored door opened in the air, and countless giant goats with muscular bodies peeked their faces out.
さあさあ急ぎなさい。脱走者は5人いるから5等賞までの早い者勝ち。 素敵なご褒美がありますよ。さあさあ頑張って頑張って。
Regalia clapped her hands, urging them on. A prize? After facing each other at those words, the goats all rushed to the door at once, trying to get out, making the exit as packed as Tozai or Yamamote rail lines in the morning. Each wanted to get out first, so none of them could get out. Regalia held her head in frustration. By that time, Cannon had managed to cut through the bars to make a crack that could be slipped through. It had been a bit of work for Kraus, large as he was, and Nanjo with his lethal waist. But even so, they all managed to make it through. But after they did, they only had a couple seconds to be relieved. Immediately, another set of metal bars blocked the way in front of them.
厳重ね。よっぽどここの人を逃がしたくなかったんでしょうね。
カノン、すまんがもう一度頼む。 辛いだろうが頼む。
There was sweat on Cannon's forehead. You could tell at a glance that cutting the metal bars, which had been made even more solid by magic, had physically exhausted him.
はい、お任せを、旦那様。
お前にしかできん。どうか頼む。
If only he could do it. Holding tightly onto those words, Cannon concentrated his mind once again and set himself to the task of cutting the metal bars again.
後方、敵が来ます。複数。
ええ、今度は私たちにもわかるわ。すごい地響きね。とんでもない化け物が殺到してくるのがわかるわ。
ご安心を。今抜けた鉄格子を私が魔法錠で封鎖します。ヤギたちごときには破れません。
Shannon held her hand out towards the metal bars that had gone through, but she stopped right away.
どうかしましたか？
ワルギリア様が霊波妨害の中和を開始。破られるとまずい。シエスタ姉妹の再起動後のイニシアチブを奪われます。
可愛いウサギたちをいじめてくれたお返しはたっぷりとさせていただきますよ。この小賢しい霊視で優位に立とうというなら、それを丸ごと剥ぎ取って私が奪ってあげます。
あのヤギたちにその鉄格子の隙間は狭すぎる。しばらくは食い止めてくれるはず。
何を言っているかさっぱりだもん。
だいぶやばいってことだけは理解できたわ。
Fury picked up a metal bar that Cannon had just cut. Cross had no weapon, but he rubbed his fists. Two of them glared into the depths of the underground passage where the shaking was coming from.
この鉄格子で遮るものはおしまいのはずだ。
ここから屋敷までどのくらいあるんです？
かなり歩く。道は平坦だが30分は歩いた記憶が。
全力疾走ならその半分ってことだわ。
You couldn't tell for sure, since they didn't have a three-sided mirror. But there was no guarantee that George and Jessica would still be alright against the demon opponents after all this time.
歩く2倍の速度で走れば15分。さらにその2倍で走れば8分を切るわ。
さらにその倍の全力疾走なら5分かかる。問題ない。
むちゃくちゃな計算ですが。ですが、カジマの計算式はそういうものです。
申し訳ございません。旦那様方、後を頼みます。
任せたまえ。カノンは1秒でも早く鉄格子を。シャノンはワルギリアとかいう魔女への妨害に専念したまえ。追っては私とキリエさんで防ぐ。
Then the roars of the beast rang out from the darkness, and several fiery, glowing, bright red eyes appeared. Ghosts that were several levels more massive than the guards were rushing with incredible force. The tremors they created were almost like an earthquake. They brought a frightening intensity and terror, but Kyrie actually laughed with relief. Those massive bodies wouldn't be able to go through the crack in the bars. A group of goats crashed to the metal bars with a fierce sound like that of a train colliding with a dead end. Clumps of dirt fell here and there from the ceiling, but you could tell that the bars had been bent as if collapsing. Their charging power was probably on par with the train. If the metal bars hadn't been there, they would have likely been overwhelmed, the 5 of them, and crushed them in an instant. When the group of ghosts pressed up against the metal bars and noticed the 5 people right in front of them, they let out a terrible howl, trying to intimidate the 5. Maybe that was out of pain from their game of push and shove. One calm goat among them figured out what needed to be done about the metal bars, and grabbed 2 of them with its massive arms and began bending them as though opening double doors. Kyrie sharply jabbed her metal pole in the goat's vitals. The goat let out a roar of anguish. It probably hurt a lot, but that was all. It wasn't enough to bring it down.
Klaus-san!
Still holding the metal pole she stuck out, Kyrie relinquished the opposite tip at Kraus. Kraus ran there with all his might, jumped up and kicked down on all his weight, kicking power behind. All that destructive power was focused on a single pole, drilling it in.
大丈夫ですかな。幹部は揉まないように。お薬は後で処方しましょう。お大事に。
As a goat who had taken a pile bunker to its vitals writhed in teary eyes, it nodded its head.
私たちのリンクも結構いけるじゃない。シャノンちゃんたちには負けられないわ。
当然じゃないか。私たちは仲良し一族だからね。
2人がかりでならいけるわ。次、右側のあいつ。
了解だ。いい嫁さんじゃないか。ルドルフね。少し愚痴が多かったんじゃないか。
へえ、後で聞かせてもらうわ。ルドルフさん、天国で青くなっても手遅れよ。
The ghost's massive bodies were buried in the rose bushes. Even taking into account that the leg's power 3 times that of the arms, the strength surpassed common sense. To think that those massive bodies had been kicked in the chin and flown in the air, it was too fierce. Even George seemed a little surprised.
僕の蹴りが化け物にも通用したとはね。驚きだよ。
あんたの反撃特化結界のせいよ。ブレイズした攻撃力をそのまま自らに上乗せしてる。あんたの蹴りにはその化け物どもの怪力が加算されてるのよ。
へえ、よくわからないけど僕にぴったりじゃないか。誰であろうとも攻撃してくるなら等しい反撃を覚悟してもらう。専守防衛、僕のポリシーそのものだ。
That's why Gap couldn't easily touch him. The counterattack style barrier had no defensive power. However, because of its countering ability, it could be useful in defense by making an opponent hesitate to attack. The goats had been foolish, so they attacked without worrying, but the second effect had its full effect against Gap.
こいつらは単調だね。パワーが互角であるならば小柄な方が有利だ。
He lightly dodged the log-like arms. When those arms touched the barrier that protected George, they let out a strong red light. The tip of the counter-attacking foot would then gain the same sparkle, and the superhuman power of the goat added to its own. The second goat fell forward and floated in air for a second. Then George's next roundhouse kick missed right over the falling goat's head. For an instant, the goat hoped it might get away with its life. But no. The heel was dropped right in the back of its head, and it was forced to kick the ground.
上段回し蹴りからの練りチャギは基本だろ。たまにやると結構当たるよ。
こいつ厄介だわ。マジで厄介だわ。
何が悪魔だ、何が魔女だ。六軒島の主人はこの後ろ宮家だよ。それを体で教えてやるよ。
こいつ。
The only way to finish off George, now that his body was wrapped up in a counter-stance type barrier, was to deny him a chance to counterattack. Nothing to do but suck him into the abyss next, then kick him, kick and drop him, kick and drop him, kick and drop him, until she kicked him to death. But George had already completely seen through the faint warning signs that told of the appearance of Gap's pitfalls. If he could just jump over that next pitfall, then this time he would probably pulverize Gap's head with his whirlwind-like kick without holding back in the slightest. Just as he had done to his parents. She was able to envision that scene vividly. Gap hated Kinzo more than ever for calling her out to this ridiculous island. Even though Uronove's held out without a shield, he still had to start using his hands. Without a more powerful shield, he wouldn't be able to block Jessica's fist anymore. This enchantment on Jessica's fist grew more the more she fought. The permeating upgrade had already sown several times. And those fists had been given an impact upgrade, a piercing upgrade, a speed upgrade, making them fists worthy to fight on par with a demon.
どうしたよ。へばってきたんじゃねえのかよ。動きが鈍ってきてるぜ。
いいえ、ジェシカ様の動きと思考、動体視力が飛躍的にエンチャントされているのです。私の動きは最初から変わっていませんよ。あなたの動きが私を捉えつつあるのです。
それでも反撃はしねえわけか。
これが私のこだわりですので。しかしこのままというわけにもいきますまい。そろそろ本気で終わりにさせてもらいますよ。
Uronove's face turned to an expression he hadn't shown before. It was full of respect for Jessica in a truly demonic way, because it was an expression he only showed for enemies that made him get serious.
なんだこれ。
With a gesture of his whole body that you couldn't call elegant, Uronove held out a shield full of strength, a shield the size and thickness of a wall. It was more tenacious than a simple shield. It was literally a wall. On top of that, with all of Uronove's magical power, it pushed Jessica back bit by bit. Did you plan on pushing her back against the wall and crushing her to death? Jessica tried to break through the wall with both fists, but it was solid. Without any exaggeration, it was solid.
これがお前の本気かよ。上等だぜ。打ち砕いてやら
ー。今度はそうはさせません。この壁は一味違います。どれ、私もエンチャントさせていただきましょう。
When Uronove made a magic sign almost like a ninja, the wall glowed red for just an instant, and some kind of ominous power dwelled within it. Jessica was able to recognize that almost immediately with her body. Every time her fist hit the wall, pain as though glass fragments had scattered and hit all over her body rebounded against her.
攻撃反応装甲を付与させていただきました。ジェシカ様の攻撃を相殺することで威力を減退させ、のみならず反応破片で反撃までできる優れものです。殴り続けるのは大いに結構ですが、それは自らにも及びます。
つまりお前の壁と私の我慢比べってことかよ。上等だ。
ジェシカ様が膝をつくのが先か、 壁に押し込まれるのが先か。見物させていただきましょう。
打ち破ってこの壁ごとお前の横っ面をぶっ飛ばす方が先かもな。見てやがれ。
Without hesitation, Jessica punched using both fists. Each time she did, a large amount of shards scattered, torturing her entire body. Instantly, several red gashes appeared all over her. She grimaced at the intense agony, but her eyes burning with fighting spirit, and her lips covered in the grin that stood in sharp contrast to the pain.
カノン、まだかね。私たちは平気だが、奴らを防ぐ鉄格子が平気ではなさそうだ。
もう少しです。
こいつらキリがないわ。おしくらまんじゅうだけで鉄格子を破りかねない。
The group of goats made the metal bars creak. Several arms grabbed the bars, twisting them with superhuman strength. However, some bars were being pulled in the opposite directions by different hands. Apparently, they were really stupid. The way those countless hands grabbed the metal bars sometimes happened to match up by chance. Several hands grasping two metal bars neatly put their power together and pulled the bar to the right, left, and right. The incredible sound of metal bending could be heard, and that the crack was getting larger bit by bit. They attacked arms of the goats one by one, but they weren't getting anywhere. They couldn't stop the gap from spraying left and right. At that time, there was a loud metal sound behind them. The cannon finally finished cutting.
早く。
キリエさん、レディーファーストだ。南條先生も続いて。
旦那様、ここは僕に任せてください。これは。
Cannon's red sword that had cut the metal bars disappeared.
ごめん、ワルギリア様の霊視線影響下に入った。私たちの魔力が中和されてる。
よくも大魔女と呼ばれた私にここまで抗ったものです。もはやその地下道ではあなたたちの魔法は使えませんよ。
The magic circle column drew a complex magical formula with Vergilia at the center. With such genuine magic power being used, Shen's power couldn't even compete. On the contrary, it was surprising that she had withstood as long as she had.
霊視優勢を確保。さあ、シエスタ姉妹、今度こそあなたたちの出番ですよ。ってまだ再起動してるんですか？なんで最近の子は寝起きが悪いの？
申し訳ありませんであります。私たち全員バージョンが違ってて。
なんでバージョン変わるたびにショートカットとプルダウンがしっちゃかめっちゃかになるに。前回不正な終了がありました？管理者権限？何これ、わけわかんない。早く直して。
この得体トラブルシュートにコール。何？ユーザーコードがないと教えない？
ユーザーコードは45が管理してるに。
救急紙に書かせろ。
言語支援システム再起動できてないから文字も書けないに。
お前たちはゆっくり修理していなさい。私が行ってきます。
ごめんなさい。
The narrow underground passage was packed with goats, truly like a commuter train in the morning. Regalia was again shocked by this congestion.
何をやってるんですか？ご褒美が欲しいから一番乗りがしたい？他のヤギにご褒美を奪われたくないから邪魔をし合っている？このおバカヤギたちが！私が行きますから道を開けなさい。何？嫌ですって？ワルギリア様がご褒美を奪うつもりだ？なんでスクラム組んでるんですか？きつい狭い。いつからここはヤギ専用車両に？うぎゅー！ 今お尻触った子、次の駅で降りなさい。何あなた、こっちへ来いって。
The Five and Crosses group dashed through the passageway with all their strength. They couldn't dawdle around in an underground place like this. They had to quickly join up with the children on the surface. If they could meet up, there would be no longer any more sorrow. At that time, a terrible rumble started chasing them. The pursuers finally made it through the middle bars, but they couldn't see anyone when they turned around. However, that rumble and dirt fell here and there from the ceiling grew closer and closer, finally catching up with them and even going past them. It almost felt like being chased by ghosts. For a second, they thought they had gotten away, until the ceiling in front of them fell in, and a single goat stood in their path. Virgilia was sitting on his shoulder.
賢い子が近道を知っていました。偉い子ですね。一等賞ですよ。後で手作りのサバのカレー煮をご馳走してあげますよ。
Maybe it really was happy about that dubious prize. The massive goat showed its joy by putting its hands together and writhing. Virgilia leapt down, laughing at this time it was finally checkmate.
そう、ダメだ。魔力が完全に殺されてる。
まだよ。魔法がなくても私たちにはまだこの体がある。
無茶だ。あんな化け物にあの不思議な力がなくて戦えるわけがない。
子供たちは下がっていたまえ。私が何とかするから、その隙にあの化け物の両脇を駆け抜けるんだ。
させませんよ。
When Virgilia clapped her hands, a purple magic circle wall appeared behind her, stealing even the faint hope that Cross had been betting on.
ランチ、キュースか。いや、まだだ。ジェシカも戦った。私が戦わんわけにはいかん。
本気なの？無理よ、あんな巨大な化け物に。
むちゃくちゃだ。クラウスさん、他の方法を考えましょ
う。思いついたら提案してくれたまえ。それまでも私が何とかするしかないようだ。さあ、下がりたまえ。
気をつけて。
おやおや、クラウス、あなた一人でこの子と戦うつもりですか？
わからんぞ。戦いにはまぐれあたりの一発だってあり得る。
まぐれでも勝てるつもりとお思いですか？身の程知らずのあなたのために私が状況を整理して差し上げましょう。
何？
あなたが 100% の力を発揮したとしてあなたの戦闘力はせいぜい6。対してこの子の戦闘力は1000。つまりあなたが100人束になっても絶対に勝てないということです。まあ確かに戦いには不確定要素もあります。その戦闘力に多少の倍率がかかることも認めましょう。しかしそれでもあなたがこの子を倒せる確率は 0.00001% というところでしょうか。お分かりかしら？あなたには万に一つの勝ち目もないということです。
Virgilia and the goat guffawed together.
くそ。毎日ということは配当は1万倍ということではないか。いい大穴だ。そういう馬券は好きだよ。買いたくなる。
それを買うコインはあなたの命1枚しかありませんよ。しかしそれでもその奇跡に運命を託したいというあなたの気持ちよくわかります。ですので恐れずに立ち向かうあなたの勇気をたたえ一つハンデを差し上げましょ この子は左腕一本で戦います。まあそれでもあなたに負ける気は全くしませんが、それにしても何かしら、さっきからピンポンピンポンと。
よかろう。その勝負受けて立ってやる。左腕だろうとなんだろうと、どうせ私は一撃で殺されるだろう。私のチャンスもまた一撃しかないのだ。それに全てかけるしかあるまい。
むちゃくちゃだクラウスさん。あんたがボクシングをやってたことは知っているが、それでも大学時代のはず。いやいや、仮にプロのボクサーがいたとしても、あんな化け物一撃で倒せるはずもない。
リングの上での試合なら確かにね。でもクラウス兄さんが望みをかけるチャンスがわずかだけどあるわ。彼はそれに全て望みをかけている。
まさか。しかしそんなのうまくいくわけがない。
旦那様、
見ていろ。一撃で決めてやる。
How shallow. I know what you're after. The distance between the two of them is more than 10 meters. If the goat and Cross both step in with all their strength to settle the fight and with a single blow, their power will be double what's normal. Both will crash together, so it's relative 4 times normal. Even if, on top of that, the strike lands on a weak point for a critical hit, it'll only do double the power again. In short, Cross's maximum power of 6 times 8 would be 48 at most. He might or might not be able to win if he repeated Lucky Shot a full 20 times. If you're killed every time you take a hit, your damage still accumulates. Let's see, perhaps you might finally win when we get to episode 24, yes? If only the series could stretch so long. Either way, you don't even have a slight chance of victory. Like, seriously, what's with that bing bong sound?
私も一撃に全てをかけさせていただく。ヤギ君も遠慮することはない。本気で来たまえ。
全力を要望ですよ。本気の一撃で粉砕し、肉片に変えてやりなさいな。
As the goat got excited and beat its chest over and over, it took a position as though preparing for a sprint. Is this what you wanted? Bet your hopes on the greatest limits of your power level, and despair when that gets you nowhere? It rang again. What the heck, it's really starting to get on my nerves. The goat howled in response. Then, they matched timing that only men confronting each other could comprehend. The two leapt forward like bullets shot out of a gun. The men howled, collecting the strength from all over their bodies into one arm each. The goat's fiery, glowing eyes clearly locked on Cross's face. You could perfectly see a vision of when he would step forward, when he would punch through Cross and blow him away, and when he would win perfectly. The long, painful days up to that point drifted to the goat's mind. Those painful days of training when his senpais had picked on him. Those faint glimpses of warm concern his senpais felt for him. And the joy of his days when he had been acknowledged, when he had been accepted as one of his comrades. I never showed proper respect to my parents. That's right, didn't I plan to wash my hands of this business when this job was over and return to my hometown? I'm sorry, little goat sister. Your Oni-chan always caused you so much trouble. And I actually have a childhood friend. I'm gonna marry her when I get home!
Yeah! ダメー！負けフラグ立てすぎちゃダメー！そのパンチはダメよ！避けてー！
It happened an instant before the two crashed and their punches crossed.
愚かね、ワルギリア。冷静な判断を欠いたようよ。
そのパンチを受けてはなりません。弾きなさい。
The very instant the goat's left straight hit Cross's right crossed. The goat obeyed Vergilia's order and super fast reflexes pulled his straight back, repelling Cross's punch. That's right, Vergilia's decision probably had been wise. After all, the number of loser flags amplifies the power level of one's opponent.
危ないところでした。こんな負けフラグ立てまくりの状態で食らっていたら、どれほどの威力に倍率がかかっていたことか。 さあ、そこでガラ空きの右側面に右ストレートを叩き込んでやりなさい。何？左腕一本で戦う約束？約束は破るためにあるのでしょうが。
いやー、また勝った。
失望よ、ワルギリア。あなたはやはり冷静を欠いていたわ。
なんですって。直前に気づいて避けさせた私のどこが冷静でないと。
どうしてですか、キリン様。あのまま激突していたら旦那様の勝ちだったのでは。
そうか。負けフラグの数が20でもまだ足りないんだ。
Crossing the goat's double rush made it times 4. With a miracle as an ally and the firm promise of a critical hit doubled it again for times 8. On top of that, there was an amplification of times 20 equal to the number of loser flags, making it times 160. At a glance, it was an incredible amplification, but even so, Cross's power level was still 6. Even multiplied by 160, it only made for a power of 960, just barely below the goat's 1000.
だから冷静じゃないと言ったのよ。あなた失敗したわ。そのまま激突していればあなたの勝ちだったのよ。
たとえそうだったとしても、この右ストレートでクラウスの頭を砕けば同じこと。死ね、後ろ宮クラウス。
食らいたまえ、ボクシング界最強の一撃を。
After repelling Cross's right straight, the goat's right straight attacked the right side of Cross's face, which had been left open. But there, it crossed Cross's left straight. The two punches crossed, and each time stopped, each aimed for the face of the other.
まさかこのタイミングで相打ちに持ってくるとは。しかし戦闘力は160倍止まりで960。うちの子の1000には及びませんでしたよ。
いや、ワルギリアさん、あんたの負けだ。
どうして？
あんた最初のクロスカウンターを弾かせちまった。確かにその次に繰り出した右ストレートが当たればクラウスさんは粉々にされていただろう。しかしそいつをクロスされてしまった。こりゃダメだ。悪いがあんたんとこのヤギさんの乾杯だよ。
A cross counter has 4 times the destructive power of a normal punch. This is common knowledge in the boxing world. And if it's blocked in the right straight hits, then it's double cross counter with 8 times the destructive power. It's also common knowledge in the boxing world. And if that is crossed, then by the principle of leverage, a triple cross counter would multiply the destructive power by 12. It is also painfully common knowledge in the boxing world. It's even written in the book.
クラウスさんの戦闘力は6。
双方2倍の踏み込みで4倍。
クリティカルヒットで8倍。
負けフラグの立てすぎで160倍。
そしてトリプルクロスカウンターでさらに12倍。
1920。
His power level is 11,520. Cross's punch now had the power to easily win the first Tenkaichi Budokai.
これは勝利を最後まで諦めなかったクラウスさんの執念とあんたの慢心が招いた結果だ。どちらが欠けてもこの威力にはならなかった。あんたよく戦ったよ。もう倒れてもいいんだぞ。
Nanjo clapped the goat on the shoulder. Your Oni-chan gave it his all. As the sparkling drops from the goat's eyes scattered, he bent backwards and fell on Vergilia.
重い。どきなさい。
The goat's massive body was too heavy for the slender Vergilia. She writhed around on top of her, but he didn't look like she'd be able to escape. In that instant, the barrier Vergilia had sealed broke.
悪く思うな。テコの原理を侮ったのが君の敗因だ。
どうしてあのカウンターでテコの原理が働くのかしらね。永遠の謎だわ。
今のうちに逃げましょう。ヤギさんもお大事に。
それでは失礼します、バルギリア様。
ペコリ。
待ちなさい。これどけて。ガブガブガブガブガブガブ。
After that, there's nothing to block their way. They ran intently through the underground passage. Jessica had finally been cornered, with the wall at her back. Ronave advanced his magic circle wall bit by bit, and would probably crush her against the other wall eventually. Considering the distance she threw out her fist, this would be her final strike. Jessica had dealt with many punches so far. The wall wasn't invincible. It had already started to crack, and it wouldn't be strange for it to smash at any moment. However, due to the rebounding damage, Jessica also had cuts all over her body, and was all worn out.
もうおよしなさい。あなたを押しつぶすつもりはありません。あなたの処遇は親方様が決めますからね。しかし、ジェシカ様のナイスファイトは私からも特に申し上げるつもりですよ。
ふざけるんじゃねえぜ。まだだ。まだ終わっちゃいねえぜ。
あなたは満身創痍。立っているのもやっとではありませんか。あなたは最後の一撃に全ての力を込めるつもりでいるようだ。しかし、その最後の一撃はむしろあなたにとって命取りになりますよ。
The damage reflected by Ronave's magic circle wall was proportional to the strength of the attack. Just because all-out punch would probably be bounced back to her. The more all-out she went, the more suicidal it would be for Jessica.
わかってるぜ。そんなことはよ。
警告します。もうおやめなさい。それがあなたのためです。
強がるなよ。お前の壁がもう破れかかってるんだろ。殴ってきた私には手応えで分かってるんだぜ。
That was a fact. Ronave's wall was already on the verge of breaking. On top of that, Jessica's fists had been imbued with an unimaginable magic attack power by now, and their destructive strength defied the imagination. In the worst case, the destructive power might even pierce the defensive wall and smash Ronave as well, and create an expansion connecting this room to the next. However, that damage would rebound to Jessica as well. She wouldn't escape unharmed.
もう一度だけ言います。おやめなさい。あなたのためを思って言っています。
やかましいぜ。覚悟しやがれ。
Jessica howled. Putting all the strength of her greatest and final destructive power into her fist, she roared. The three goats had been beaten down long ago. Without straining to breathe in the slightest, George cautiously closed the distance between him and Gap. He was after her. He was planning on bringing her down with a single strike. Gap was also aiming for a single strike. If she let that chance slide, she would be killed this time.
落とし穴は使わないのかい?
Even the tiny opening during the time it took to open the hole would prove fatal with George as an opponent right now. Gap cautiously calculated distance and timing, but even as she did, George closed the gap between them.
来ないなら行くよ。
来なさいよ。今さら小細工も何もないわ。私のこの蹴りで決着をつけてやる。
For an instant, she thought George's body blurred, and only his jacket was floating in the air. Moments she thought, darkness-covered gap. George, with his heel spun up high, was attacking from the sky like a massive dragon.
かかったわね。これで私の勝ちよ。後ろ宮ジョージ。
何？
Gap opened a vast pitfall with her at the center, swallowing up George along with herself. The two were swallowed up by the pitfall and spat out from the ceiling of the arbor. But that was what Gap had been after, so she alone landed gracefully lightly. However, there's another pitfall in George's landing spot.
もらったわ、後ろ宮ジョージ。面白かったわよ。死になさい。あんたみたいな上等。後ろ宮家の当主なんてもったいないわ。今この場で私が食ってあげる。
George once again fell from the ceiling of the arbor. He had probably been dropped the same distance of falling off a roof of a two-story building. In this guy, he couldn't control his posture in any way. It was impossible to resist or defend or avoid. As Gap spun around like a whirlwind, she concentrated all her energy on the sharp tip of her stiletto heel. This was the final strike, to perform his requiem. The final strike of the queen bee that would bore into heaven, knocking him down to the true abyss.
ようこそ奈落へ。ここがあんたの終着点よ。
She closed in on her prey and stuck her foot up into the sky. At that time, she saw George's face. Even though he was midair, he was calmly adjusting his glasses with the middle finger of his right hand. And his posture was still preserved as that of an axe kick. Without the faintest deviation, he aimed for Gap's forehead.
君がその手に出ることは想定済みだったよ。僕が地上の君に飛びかかとを食らわせるために飛んでいたなら、僕の姿勢はとっくに崩れていただろうさ。しかし僕の姿勢はいささかも崩れない。なぜかわかるかい？僕は初めから数フロア下の君にかかとを食らわせるつもりで飛んでいる。君の負けだ、お嬢さん。
ピンポーン。
The final, strongest punch that Jessica had raised reached the wall and was sucked in. It was sucked into a black, large hole that had suddenly opened in the wall.
だからおやめなさいと忠告したのに。
実は全然ピンチでもなんでもなかったの。ごめんなさいね。
Jessica's fist had gone through George's stomach, and George's axe had lined up on Jessica's head. The shocking destructive power imbued in Jessica's fist crushed George's organs and scattered his abdomen. The same destructive power in George's axe kick smashed half of Jessica's head and scattered its contents in the same manner.
だって魔女は演技力なんでしょ。ねえねえリーちゃん、どうよ、見ててくれたかしら。やるな、筋書き通り。やっぱガープは分かってるじゃん。イエーイ。
Beato and Gap casually high-fived each other.
ありがとロノウェイ。こっちで美味しくいただけた。ジェシカの死体はそっちに返すわ。二人で寄り添う死体を引き離す。これで第二の晩は出来上がり。
Gap dropped Jessica's corpse to a pitfall. and all the chunks that were thrown into Jessica's room, as carelessly as throwing something into the trash. Jessica's corpse and lumps of flesh fell from the ceiling and poured all over her room. Renove shook his head slightly at the gruesome change of scenery.
申し訳ございません。ジェシカ様、ご忠告は申し上げたのですよ。もっとも、この結末を予見し、聞き入れないと分かっている忠告を重ねる悪魔の醍醐味は、人間には分からないでしょうがね。
本当に面白かったわ、坊や。でもあんたちょっと言葉遊びが過ぎるわよ。そろそろ反撃してもいいかなが最高傑。あなたどこかのラノベか何かにかぶれすぎよ。
In the arbor brutally decorated by George and Jessica's scattered blood and guts, Gap enjoyed a loud laugh for a while, but she quickly realized that, in all seriousness, this was a bit too filthy and undignified, so she snapped her fingers. As she did, a cloud of gold butterflies rose up around her, stuck to each bits of bloodstains and dropped them. Then George's corpse returned bit by bit, and the brutal corpse with its guts torn out repaired into a clean corpse that looked like it was sleeping. Was this some act of sportsmanship towards the dead rival? The heavens were split, because Gap had lifted her leg high, pointing at the sky.
じゃあね、色男。これが本当のゲームオーバー。
Without a trace of mercy, that foot stepped down, and was buried into George's forehead. The stiletto heel that was as sharp as a weapon pierced George's forehead. With a bloop, it was pulled out. And it was like a mark proving that Gap had certainly finished him by her own hand. Renove also returned Jessica's corpse to its original form, and unlike how it had been with George, he restored Jessica's life.
これは一体夢？
いいえ、違います。ジェシカ様は確かにお亡くなりになりました。最後の瞬間の記憶をよくご存知のはずだ。
Jessica's mind was burning. For some reason, she remembered being thrown somewhere and having George's heel smashed into her head.
私は生きてるのか？
いいえ、死んでいます。私の魔法でほんの3分ほどそれを先送りにしているに過ぎません。3分が過ぎれば魔法が終わり、あなたは無残な頭部半壊の死体に戻ります。
だと
死は残酷です。多くの場合、心の整理さえ与えない。しかし私はここまで検討したあなたを称え、その時間を与えることにしました。その3分間でこの世の未練をよく整理されるといいでしょう。
その3分でお前を道連れにするという手もあるぜ。
But the power that had burned through Jessica's body until just a second ago had been completely lost. Jessica was aware of that herself. She was already dead.
それでは私はこれにて失礼いたします。楽しかったですよ、ジェシカ様。
Renove turned his form into a cloud of gold butterflies and disappeared. All that remained was the sound of the wind and rain, and the figure of Jessica as he crouched down, leaning against the wall. Jessica could tell. She was probably really would revert to the corpse she had been in after 3 minutes. Was there anything she could do in those 3 minutes? She stood up with a shaky gait, took the phone that was on the desk.
もしもし、ジェシカか。ジェシカ、どうした？無事か？
やられしまったぜ。
大丈夫か？怪我をしてるのか？今助けに行く。
いや、もう遅いぜ。私さ、もう死んでるんだと。バトラーが来た時には私は頭を半分ぶちまけた死体だよ。
クソじじいめ、待てろ、今そこに行くからな。
聞けよバトラー。いいか、よく聞く、小田さんたちがどうして食堂で6人が殺された時のこと、歯切れが悪いのかよく分かった。あいつらな、人間じゃねえんだぜ。
何を言ってんだ。
見ちまったんだ。仕方ねえだろ。あいつらさ、ワープしたりバリア張ったりやりたい放題だぜ。どこの漫画だよ、アニメだよ。いや、マジでかなわねえぜ。最初からさ、戦うとか無理なんだよ。バトラーが自慢してた棒仕掛けの槍程度でとてもどうにかなる相手じゃねえぜ。
A line of blood dripped from Jessica's forehead.
ジョージ兄さんもダメだった。ありゃ、即死だ。次のテストはバトラだな。お前のテストも私たちと同じになるのかな。用心しろよ。そして間違えるな。
テストか？
違う。敵はどうせ人間だと間違えるなよ。敵は人間じゃない。恐ろしい魔法を自在に扱える悪魔なんだ。そこを絶対に間違えるんじゃねえぜ。用心しろよ。
A line of blood dripped from Jessica's mouth as well. The left half of her head started hurting. Jessica realized she was about to return to the corpse she had just been.
13人死ねば黄金の魔女が蘇る。母さんたちが殺されて6人。これで第1の番。そして私とジョージ兄さんが死んで第2の番。あと5人殺されれば儀式は完成で魔女が蘇るってわけだ。父さんたち無事だといいな。もし無事じゃなかったらお前をテストするのは復活したてのベアトリーチェ自身ってことになるかもしれねえぜ。
Tyler already didn't understand what Jessica was saying, but from her tone, he realized that he knew that she was about to die. So, even though he didn't understand the situation, he urged her to give it her all.
私はもう死んでるんだって。じゃあな、もう時間みたいだ。テスト頑張れよ。お前が当主になれると
ジェシカジェシカおい返事をしろジェシカ
Balor's sorrowful voice could be heard from the dangling receiver. As she leaned against the wall in that corner, crouched down, Jessica's head had been half smashed.
Koko? これは井戸なのか。ここはどこなんだ。
Fury stuck her face out of the well, and then Cross showed himself too. When he realized that they could see the back of the mansion from beyond the grove of trees, Cross knew more or less where they were. To think that here, in a certain well, there had been a hidden underground passage, which led to a hidden mansion.
老体にはやはりこれは辛いですな。普段は別の場所からちゃんと階段で上がれるのです。鍵さえ開けば。
南條先生には後でいろいろとここの構造についてお教え願いたいものだ。シャノン、大丈夫かね。捕まりたまえ。
大丈夫です。カノン君、早く。
Conan climbed up the ladder and out of the shaft that was disguised as a well. It was probably quite deep. When he looked down for the first time, he realized how far they'd come up.
にひ、射撃。
As Cannon was about to crawl out of the well, a hole the size of a basketball opened up in his chest. Everyone there looked through the hole in the cannon's chest to the scenery beyond. Cannon slumped backwards and was swallowed up into the depths of the well.
みんな逃げて。シスト姉妹、捕捉されてます。回避できない。走って、一人でも生き残って。
At that time, crossing Kyrie and Nanjo, certainly saw a golden curved line appear from the well, and sow itself through the side of Shannon's head.
Shannon!
Her head had been pierced. The three had witnessed it perfectly until it shot out of the opposite side, blowing it away. Shannon fell to her knees, blood gushing from both sides of her head, and flopped to the ground.
私たちは狙われてる。走って殺されるわよ。
走れ走れ走れ走れ
As Nanjo doubled over in shock, stunned by how Shannon had died, the Chaser sisters did not allow him to escape. A curved line again appeared from the well, and pierced from Nanjo's forehead to the back of his head in an instant, sewing through him. And so, Nanjo passed away.
何なんだどうしてなんだ敵はどこから
狙撃されてるのよ。どこか知らないけど私たちを完全に捉えてる。屋敷へ逃げ込むのよ。視界を遮るのよ。
The two dashed towards the back door of the mansion. Then Rise Cross was about to shut the door behind him. A golden curved line appeared from the fourth time, pierced across from the back of his head to his forehead, and then smashing that forehead. Cross's body leaned over, fell down, and drew a neat braid-owl pattern on the inside of his head. Kyrie ran wildly through the hallway, flew into some room, and locked the door. But even so, she wasn't remotely convinced that this had saved her life. She would probably die soon. This was apparently one of the guest rooms. At that moment, Kyrie's eyes fell on a phone on the side table. After hanging up from the call from Jessica, Balor had been just about to dash out. In that instant, the phone rang again.
もしもしキリエさん
はい、バトラ君。ラッキーだったわ。なんとか力を脱出できたの。本当についてた。
そこはどこだ？みんな無事なのかよ。こっちはジェシカとジョージの兄貴がどうやら。
聞いて、私の命は多分もう長くは持たないわ。
At that time, right after she thought the keyhole of the locked door might have glowed gold, a gold curved line drawing a helix. No, a golden sewing needle thread penetrated from there at an incredible speed and bored a hole into the floor by Kyrie's feet. Oh, that's unusual. The enemy who sniped from the other floor one shot after another with extraordinary skill. Apparently really does have trouble shooting me between the eyes with a single shot while I'm holed up in this room. But the next strike will probably hit. At this point, Kyrie finally remembered the first massive killing in the dining hall. That's right. This is what killed Rudolph and the rest, all 6 of them.
聞いて、バトラ君。私が見たことをありのまま話す。バトラ君はきっと私の頭がどうにかなってしまったんだろうと思うに違いない。ええ、思ってくれていいわ。私だって何を見たのか未だに整理がつかない。今日バトラ君たちがゲストハウスに帰ってから食堂で親族会議が始まって、そして何が起こったかを全て話すわ。口を挟まないで最後まで聞いて。途中で急に電話が切れるかもしれない。そしたらその時は私が殺された時よ。
Then Kyrie spoke, about Kinzo appearing and the family conference starting, about the 6 being killed and the 5 of them being confined, about how she had escaped somehow and ran away to where she is now, and how everyone had finally been killed. It was all spoken dispassionately, with no dramatization, just as she had seen it. She even spoke about how everyone except her had been killed, and how she had observed the moments of all their deaths, and how even now someone was trying to kill her.
実はこの話をしている間にももう3度攻撃を受けている。鍵穴からおかしな黄金の糸みたいなのが飛び込んできて、くるくる回りながら私を狙ってくるの。最初は足元、次は肩の近く、さっきのは耳をかすったわ。狙いがだんだん正確になってくる。そろそろ私の眉間にズドンと来そうね。
逃げろ、キリエさん。逃げてくれ。
どこへよ。私ここまで逃げ延びてきて部屋に閉じこもって鍵までかけてるのよ。それでもなお狙われてる私がどこに隠れるのよ。ねえ。
さあ。
ねえ、バトラ君、ジェシカちゃんとジョージ君、まだ生きてる？
さっきジェシカから電話が。なんかダメみたいだった。
やっぱり私たち5人が次々殺される時、何か予感していたの。ひょっとして13人殺しの儀式は第2の番を終えて私たちの番にまで至ったのかなって。つまり私が死ねば13人、これで儀式は完成。黄金の魔女ベアトリーチェが復活する。一体どういうことになるのかしら。こんな悪魔だらけの魔女だらけ、ヤギの化け物がうじゃうじゃいるこの島に、さらにそいつらの親玉である黄金の魔女まで現れて、一体どうなっちゃうというのかしら。もう私には何が何だかわからない。
Kyrie-san's voice had completely given up on her own life, because Balor understood that. He couldn't stop the tears.
一つだけ助言できることがあったわ。
何？
もしあなたの前に悪魔やら魔女が現れても、
ああ、
その正体を疑う必要は何もないわ。そういうものだと理解して。何か仕掛けがあるはずだとか、正体があるはずだとか、そんなことを考える余裕があったら 相手の機嫌を損ねないことを考えた方がよっぽどに建設的。間違ってもなら魔法を見せてみろなんて言っちゃダメよ。その証拠を彼らはこの上なく残酷な方法で見せるでしょうから。
信じらんねえよ。キネさんの口からそんなこと言われるなんて信じらんねえよ。
分かってる、信じられないのは。だからそれこそが私にできる助言。信じて。
ペアとリーチェと悪魔と魔女と化け物どもを信じろと。
あれほどまでにこの世ならざるものをありありと見せつけられても多分何も信じることができなかったと思うの。今の私もそう。さっきから襲ってきて私の額を撃ち抜こうとする者の正体さえ私には理解できず信じられない。だからあなただけは信じ理解して私たちに受け止めきれなかった存在を受け止めてほしいの。そうしてくれたなら私たちの死は無駄にならない。私もこうして電話をした甲斐があったというものだわ。
キレさん
まだ大丈夫よ。かすったけどまた外したわ。さすがに今度はもうダメかもね。ありがとう。そしてさよならバトラ君。あなたのことアスムさんの息子だからと冷たくしたこともあったの。その日のことを許して。
許すも何も今はキレイさんが俺にとっての母親だろうが。
I felt as though I had heard an incredible sound at the other end of the receiver. Then, a noisy clanking sound. As though the receiver had fallen to the floor.
キレイさんキレイさん
Kiri-san did not answer through the phone again.